Hello again, everybody. It's me, the DB Cooper sleuth, Ryan Burns, and today I am joined by my good friend, Mickey McMickington, Jude Morrow, my favorite Mick in the world, coming to us from Belfast. Correct, Jude?
Absolutely. Belfast, Northern Potatoville.
Northern Potatoville. Awesome. Okay. Well, yeah. So he was just telling me that he is out there at maybe a conference or a meeting about the Titanic. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a recent exploration to the Titanic. Well, I've got like a work thing tied in as well, but there's like a thing on in Titanic Belfast about the recent Titanic dive and the state of the wreck and the future of exploration of the ship. Because, I mean, you'll not see it. It's too dark here. Like it's midnight here now. But I mean, out that window of where I'm staying, like the cranes are there, the Harlot de Wolf cranes. I mean, you can see them from all over Belfast.
Wow.
But it's just been a bit of a sad update from the recent dive, and it's like where everybody's being gathered around to be told the bad news tomorrow of what's going on, and it ain't going to be good.
And the bad news is, you were telling me before we went on the air, you can share it with everybody here as well.
Well, some parts of the wreck have collapsed. The port side guardrail at the front of the bow, that iconic Titanic image that you have in your mind of the wreck, is now no longer what it looks like, because this rail is now fallen off and is just lying beside the ship.
That's a real shame. Yeah, the deterioration on that thing it's got less than 10 years before it collapses, is what they're saying.
Yeah, it's accelerating. The deterioration has started to accelerate.
Right. And so, well, as I was saying, though, at least it's been documented pretty thoroughly. There's 3D documentaries. Was it? Documentaries about it. So we at least have that to go on it, at least. But yeah, that's a real tragedy on the Titanic. I always laugh about it. For whatever reason, whenever I think about the Titanic, I think about the fact that they one of the suggestions to raise the Titanic was literally to fill it with ping pong balls or ballast of some sort like that. To try
the ping pong balls raising the Titanic, that's the Titanic community's version of McCoy.
Oh yeah, it's just yeah. Well, look, I'm a Titanic guy, and I'm pretty sure that I did read that somewhere, like ages ago.
You did. It was hypothesized, and not only that, but investors from the United States of America land actually considered it. Where they're like, we're going to fill up the wreck of the Titanic. Now, by the way, the wreck of the Titanic, as it sits still down there, you're still talking maybe 6,000-7,000 tons. That's a lot of ping pong balls that you're going to need. To lift the thing up.
I mean, there are photos out there. If you were to Google it, I mean, basically, I would say probably 80% of it is beneath the ground. So whatever you see, the silt is because it smashed into it. It buried itself very deep. So the actual ship, I mean, there's no way to pull. It's almost like, when you step into quicksand or you step on a bog in some mud, you can't get your foot out. It would be the same way. It would just be suctioned, and there's no way to really raise that when it's buried that deeply. Anyway, so enough of Titanic. We're going to talk about Cooper tonight, and we're going to play my favorite game, which is it's called Suspect Roulette. And what we do here is basically we go back and forth, defending a suspect, attacking a suspect, drawn at random from my Northwest Orient goodie bag here. But first, I want to give some shout outs to some people. I see that Brad and Nicole Legg are in the chat. We have Lisa Cesare is in the chat. Let's see, hopefully Poirot, my friend, is watching, and hopefully they are feeling better. And hopefully I will see them at CooperCon. That would be nice. Jeremy Cosgrave is in the chat. And, of course, my companion in the new DB CooperCon is in the chat. John Limbach, the author of Where Was Skip?, the book about Skip Hall. I do believe he has a second book on Skip Hall, perhaps coming out another time soon, which would be great. Hello, Oracle. Hello, Robert Moore from the UK. All right. So, yes, as Packer John Limbach points out, you cannot tour the inside of the Titanic, but one thing you will be able to tour is the inside of a 727-100 at CooperCon this year. We have managed to convince them to open up the 727-100 that they have there. Now, I doubt they'll lower the aft stairs for us, but you can at least go in there, which would be great. And if you have a CooperCon ticket, you can go inside the 727-100 and look around and see exactly how far away all these things happen. You can, I don't know if they'll let you sit in the seats, but you can essentially approximate where Bill Mitchell was to Cooper, which was 5 feet away. You can see where the interphone was with Tina. You can basically get a sense of it. And apparently for those who've been in 727-100s, they are very small. I forget what they had a name for them. Yes, I forget what they had a name for them, but they were like the short bus essentially of aviation back then. They were very kind of squat things. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get started. So Jude, we need to figure out, okay, so we're going to flip a coin. Whoever wins is going to be the attacker, and we'll go with the attacker first. Or actually, what's better? Do you think it's better to go with the defender first or the attacker?
How about we flip a coin and then the winner just gets to decide who gets to attack or defend first?
Okay, well, that's a good, it's like picking your chess piece. Okay, so I'll let you call heads or tails.
Okay, I will go heads. Will we explain the couple of little differences to spice this up a bit? And by the way, this is my favorite game in the world too. I feel like I'm on my favorite game show. This is great.
Yes. Okay. So yes, we do have one change. We get a mulligan essentially, as you would say in golf. So each person has a pass. So when we do the pass, we get to flip. So if I don't want to attack a certain person, I can use my pass and it'll flip around and we'll change it around and Jude will have to attack that person and vice versa. So we get one pass each time. So that's a new rule, a new wrinkle we're doing. So Jude said heads. So I will flip my coin now and it is tails. So I go first and I think the defender should go first in this game. That's what I think. I think the person should defend and then attack. So, okay. So let's see. I will be going first and let's see. I will be defending. Oh, okay. William J. Smith. All right. William J. Smith. Defending William J. Smith. Okay. Well, I would say that William J. Smith, unlike many Cooper suspects, did have a dark skin. He was, I believe, Eastern European of some sort, Hungarian type. So he did have some swarthy skin. Smith was not his real last name. His real last name was something similar to the Jack the Ripper suspect, Kosminski. It was something like that. It was some kind of name like that for over there. And they changed it to Smith once they got here, his family. So his original name is something like that. But anyway, I would say that he, unlike some Cooper suspects, also has aviation history. In World War II, he was on he was a crewman on a Navy, I want to say a dive bomber or a torpedo bomber, one of those big Navy planes that had 3 crewmen, essentially maybe a TBD Avenger or one of those Dauntless, one of those type planes. But he did have aviation experience. He was in Navy aviation on an aircraft carrier. So he's got that. And let's see. Well, that's really all I've got on William J. Smith. Here's a photo. I'll pull up my photo of William J. Smith here. This is him as an old man, but you can see he famously does have the hair of the Cooper sketch that people like. And, but yeah, there's William J. Smith in 1985, I believe. So that is defending William J. Smith. So Jude, please attack William J. Smith.
Okay. Well, a theme of a lot of my defenses will be about the physical description, where what seems to happen in the Cooper community is we suspect hammer, or people can suspect hammer, that people will accuse witnesses of being unreliable and so on and so forth. And a very telling characteristic of Cooper that is universally agreed upon, that he had a thin nose. William J. Smith does not have a thin nose. And I mean, from the image that's up on the screen, with the composite A, the Bing sketch, everybody agreed that he had a thin nose. William J. Smith did not have a thin nose. At that time, I mean, let's look at how the guy was brought into the case. He was brought into the case simply for the reason that he was, I suppose, unfairly tied to a lot of fictional coincidences and occurrences from a quasi-fictional memoir-type book written by Max Gunther. He had no criminal record, no criminal history. He had a honest, good relationship. He was a trade unionist. He was a family man. He adopted 2 children. At the time of the hijacking, he was working 2 jobs. He was caring for his wife who had cancer. So this does not seemingly fit the profile of a man who would leave his 2 young adopted children, his 2 young adopted girls, I believe, to go and show another guy's girl a bomb on a plane the day before Thanksgiving. I think the whole William J. Smith link is absolutely ridiculous beyond belief. It would almost be akin to tying James Bond to being D.B. Cooper. And even though James Bond was around the right age, especially in the later novels, it just seems as if the guy was unfairly pulled out of absolutely nowhere. I suppose to give some sort of fairness and balance, yes, are there people who never committed any crimes? Can they commit one good big crime? Yes, they can. But did William J. Smith do that? Absolutely not. He was never investigated by the FBI. He's only been brought in the last few years on a whimsical, obscure book from the 1980s by Max Gunther.
Okay.
So there we go.
Yes, and I'll say this as well. We can, once a suspect is done like this, once the attacker stops, we can discuss the person without attacking or defending them. And yeah, the link is it comes from the Max Gunther book. And as I've said before, with respect to my friend Dave Feudman, who came up with William J. Smith, I do like Dave a great deal. But
me too.
I do consider him a friend. But the problem is that if what is it? Nothing in the book really matches William J. Smith, which is the problem. Is the character leaves his college age daughter. I think he drops her off, I think in the book at college, and then goes to the West Coast for years and meets this woman, and then they have a relationship, and then he dies in the 80s. Like, there's no indication that William J. Smith ever absconded from his family at all.
No.
So
there's
right. So that right there, the problem is that right there is wrong. So what is wrong and what is right? What do you believe in? What's not true? What is true? It's a mess if you try to derive a suspect from. And I think another issue is that the way that William J. Smith was found was that I know Martin Andrade and Dave Feudman were looking into links in the book, and the main character in the book, or the Cooper in the book, his name is Dan LeClaire, and they were looking for people with Dan LeClaire's name, and they came across a Dan Clare from New Jersey who had been a paratrooper in the war. And I believe Dave was looking through a yearbook of workers who had worked with Dan Clare and found the William J. Smith photo. But the problem with that is, why Dan Clare is not, even if you believe that the Max Gunther story is true, Dan Clare is a pseudonym that Gunther invented for his character, or for the Cooper character. He's not using the real name, or he's probably not using anything remotely similar to the real name if it was a real story, right? So finding a guy based on Dan Clare, it'd be like if, I don't know, if somebody came to me and admitted that they did a crime and I wrote a book about it, I'm not using their real name for one thing, and I'm not using anything close to their real name for another thing. So it's kind of strange. So, it's okay. David Triol, hey David, he's talking about Bill Whitney. Yes, Bill Whitney does look like D.B. Cooper. I do have the Bill Whitney photograph, I believe, right here that I can bring up. The problem with Bill Whitney, David, is that Bill Whitney was a 5'6". Okay, yes, he was interviewed by the FBI a bunch, and he does look like the Bing sketch, although that nose is a bit wide. But he does look like the Bing sketch, of course, and he was a master skydiver. In fact, Bill Whitney, I believe, he was also 33 at the time, so he's pretty young. But Bill Whitney, I believe, had the altitude record for a while, which I guess is currently held by Baumgartner, I suppose. The Red Bull.
No, it was beaten since. Baumgartner was beaten since.
You're
But
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
Bill Whitney was an absolute rock star. Too young. I believe, is Bill Whitney still with us?
I think he is, actually. Yes.
I think he is, yeah.
In fact, actually, that might be somebody to try to find. If he still lives in Seattle, we should get him to CooperCon. That'd be cool. But yeah, he was.
Go ahead.
He was interviewed for 5.5 hours by the FBI, and as he should have been. He was a skydiver and he may have worked at Boeing as well, David. But he was too young and too short. But he was suspected immediately because he does look like the sketch, but just didn't fit. And I believe he must have had a rock solid alibi because they let him go pretty soon. Okay. All right. So now it is.
You know what's interesting before we go back into the Northwest Orient shaving bag of doom is Nikki had said in the comments, I wanted Jude to get William J. Smith. Dude, you absolutely should have used your flip there. The first one you had a flip card and you just didn't use it. Because I would have been completely stuck. Since we talked about this last week, I have been in cold sweats for 7 days, hoping that I wouldn't get William J. Smith. And I celebrated like this for the people watching it back. And I celebrated. See, if you had to put on the flip right there, I would have.
You'd have just turned
that would have been it.
Yes. Yeah. All right. DB Cooper himself says, question for Ryan. It's way off topic, but does your book have a tentative release date? It does not. In fact, I just completed it the past couple of weeks. So need to find a publisher and get all that stuff going. So I'm not self-publishing. It actually is going to have a publisher and have a rollout, things like that. So no tentative release date yet. Okay. So Jude, it is your turn to defend. You're going to defend Vince Peterson. Good luck,
Peterson.
Homie.
Okay.
Good luck.
He was male.
There you go. Okay.
Over
thank
to
you,
Mr. Barnes.
Yeah. Okay. On to you. That's literally it. In fact, it was male. It's okay. So Vincent Peterson is a preposterous suspect. Frankly, outrageously preposterous. Vincent Peterson. Okay. He was an American man in 1971. There you go. That's pretty much it on Vincent Peterson. So Peterson was brought about by Eric Ulis by the connection to the tie particles, the rim crew tie particles. For those who've been living under a rock, I suppose, one of the odd things that was found on the tie were 3 titanium antimony particles, and these particles have been traced to crucible steel known as rim crew at the time. And Vincent Peterson worked there. But how he was found was Eric Ulis went out there and came across a 90-something-year-old man who worked at rim crew in the titanium lab at the time and asked this man, who just without any predicate just said, who did you work with in 1971 that was tall and about 50 years old? And the guy said, well, Vince Peterson. So Eric took that and made that guy Cooper. Didn't ask, investigated no one else at rim crew, just decided, okay, well, this is my guy. This old man said he was 50 years old and had dark hair and was tall. Well, that was all that was necessary to make this guy a suspect. Essentially, the defense, there's just nothing there. This guy, I remember so Nikki Broughton, Chris Brower, and myself researched, well over 100 people who had connections to these tie particles for Crucible and other places. And, Vincent Peterson was just not ever on the radar. In fact, I remember calling Eric after he announced Vincent Peterson, because we had already looked at Peterson. And I remember joking, because his draft card, that's the first place you look to get measurements on these guys, is their draft card. They're measured in their bare feet, so you can get an idea of how tall they were, hair color, skin complexion. Vincent Peterson's draft card says blue eyes, blonde hair, 6'2", and missing a piece of his finger, even of his pinky finger. So the joint of his finger was gone. So the tip of his pinky finger was gone. His hair's parted on the wrong side. All these things. Of course, Eric would say, well, it's easy to part your hair on the other side as a disguise. Well, I would say, well, if you're missing a piece of your finger, wear gloves. I mean, if you're trying to hide any distinguishing characteristics, then wear gloves. If you're gonna do your hair the wrong way, well, that'll fool them. Like, it's preposterous. So, and he had no history in aviation at all, other than, he did. Crucible Steel had connections to aviation, of course. They did provide the components for a lot of for the 727s. In fact, Vincent Peterson and Verdal did work on Boeing 727s as far as the producing the alloys that were the skin of the things. But he had no practical aviation experience. And I know he traveled to Seattle one time, but that's not enough to be familiar with the Pacific Northwest to any degree. Just a terrible, terrible suspect. In fact,
the worst. Can I put on a side note
please,
there? I took this game very seriously. Like, it's almost as if I was going on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or something like that. And I tried really, really hard to try and find some way to defend Vincent Peterson. And I am a creative guy. I can pull things from any orifice from my body at any point in time, any day of the week, on demand. But for this, I just couldn't.
It's really hard. In fact, I didn't even know what to say. At Eric's request, I actually wrote the Wikipedia entry for Vincent Peterson. And as you'll see on the Wikipedia page, it is basically 2 sentences. There's nothing to say there. Just nothing there. And it's, in fact, literally the only thing that he matches on the Cooper description is male. He's too tall, even. His hair's the wrong color. His hair's parted on the wrong side. It's really, really, it's baffling. Jerome says, well, Eric's new suspect be in the roulette. I hate to harp on Eric, but the new suspect, I don't want to dignify it by giving the guy's name out, but the new suspect Eric came up with, if it's possible to even be worse than Vincent Peterson, he found a guy worse than Vincent Peterson. The new guy is astonishingly, it's even worse. The new guy was, in fact, I wish I could try to find a photograph of this guy to show you people. In fact, let me do that, because I'd like for people to see just how ridiculous this new guy is. And the new guy, for one thing, was I believe he was the president or a vice president of Rim Crew for a while, moved to California. At the time of the hijacking, he was the president of a steel company, in California at the time. So what is the president of a steel company doing, hijacking a plane? In fact, this new guy, I really want to show you guys this photograph of him.
And while you're getting that photograph, it is a remarkable achievement to have found somebody either equally as bad or maybe worse than Vincent Peterson. Like, Vincent Peterson was not DB Cooper, the end. The end, full stop, draw a line under it. Neither's this new guy. And he's not even a new guy. He's just not a guy. He's not in the conversation. It's just absurd.
Yeah, it's so bad. And the guy was bald and had really thick, like hairy Carey glasses, as you'll see. Let's see. In fact, so this might be it.
Glasses, Mary said.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, this funny is, I'll put up a Photoshop that somebody did about this guy. This is what this guy looked like. So if you think that Vincent Peterson was bad, then check out this fella here. Let me get this. This is this is preposterous. So this is what the guy looked like. Okay, here we go. Yeah, 1971, 1970. So if you think DB Cooper was bald, you can see that there's at the top 65, 66, and then 70. So how do you get from there to there? Strand was the guy's name. Yeah. This guy was a rich guy, no criminal history, was the president of a company, bald, with giant Coke bottle glasses. I mean, and so Eric goes to the media with this guy, and it's just, what are you doing? But yeah, it's bizarre. So yes, worse than Vince, Mark Beretta. Absolutely worse than Vince. I did not think it was possible to have a worse suspect actually have their name submitted to the media than this guy here. This is really, really bad. So anyway, okay, poor John Strand. And okay, next, it's my turn to defend. Oh, E. Howard Hunt. Okay. All right. Yes, I know you probably wanted that one, didn't you? But
I did, because as a front note, it's my common question. It comes up all the time. Who do you want to be DB Cooper? My answer is, and always has been, E. Howard Hunt. I'm heartbroken, but please defend my guy, as people say here.
You know what? Okay. Honestly, go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and use my pass. I will let you.
No, do not, because you know what? I do have a good argument against.
Okay, great. All right. Well, okay. So I'm defending E. Howard Hunt. So E. Howard Hunt was, for those who don't know, was considered a kind of a fixer. He was a guy who was this, basically there he is there. He was he liked spy novels. During World War II, he was in the special service, sort of the pre-CIA. I think they called it the OSS. He was there. He was into spy novels. In fact, I believe that Ethan Hunt, the character in Mission Impossible, is named after this guy. He did have parachuting experience. He was a brave individual. And he did have some kind of a criminal darkness to him. I don't know exactly what his criminal history was, but there actually is a book out there. I believe it's free online on Amazon, on Kindle, to read. Nate LaFouque is the pen name of the person who wrote it. I can't recall the title of the book. In fact, let me try to find the title of the book so you can look it up yourself. But it is a good book. I enjoyed it, and it was well written.
DB Cooper, Unmasked and Exposed.
Yeah, there. Yeah, here you can see on my phone there. That's what it looks like, by Nate LaFouque. DB Cooper, Examined, Identified, and Exposed is the book about E. Howard Hunt. So yeah, E. Howard Hunt had the expertise. He was the right age. I believe he was maybe 50 years old at the time. The right age. He moved about a lot, so he could have moved around a lot. He had aviation experience. He was kind of just a bit of a badass, and also wrote spy novels. So, which means he had the ability to have divergent thinking, and which is important for Cooper, I think. But yeah, he's kind of not a mainstream suspect, but he's out there. So go ahead and attack E. Howard Hunt.
E. Howard Hunt is a good suspect, because he does have the skill set, but E. Howard Hunt was integral in the Watergate scandal. If you were watching the news, E. Howard Hunt at one stage was on the front of every single major newspaper in America. Yeah. And of the 36 passengers in the plane, somebody somewhere, especially Tina or Flo or Alice, would have thought, holy shit, who we spoke to was E. Howard Hunt. And E. Howard Hunt was a rock star throughout his whole life. During the, I think it was there was a meeting in the middle of the Atlantic during World War II, and Roosevelt was there, Winston Churchill was there, right. And it was guarded by the USS Mayo. And who was on that ship was E. Howard Hunt, and everybody knew him. So he was a bit of a rock star during the war, and he wrote in his lifetime about 80 novels. So up to 1971, the guy had written about 40 novels, even by then. So E. Howard Hunt was quite wealthy. And he also was a recipient of the Guggenheim Literary Prize, which is really quite prestigious. So as a writer, he was a rock star. In the army, he was a rock star. Although with the CIA, he was a deeply troubled and sinister individual who, whilst being a dork, could probably lift a phone and have you killed. If E. Howard Hunt was DB Cooper, somebody somewhere would have known. He wasn't wonderful at keeping secrets. He wasn't wonderful at planning large operations. If you look at the Bay of Pigs invasion, he made an absolute mess of that. That didn't work. So E. Howard Hunt did have some challenges in keeping his mouth shut, was already wealthy. Everybody knew who he was. And it doesn't matter how many connections he had in the CIA or the OSS. 53 years have passed since Norjack. Somebody somewhere would have said something to get themselves a big chunk of money and an author of the Pulitzer Prize. So whilst I would love this kind of dorky, sinister spy to be D.B. Cooper, not the guy, too pale and too blue-eyed and too recognizable and too much of a household name.
Yeah, he would have been, like you said, he was on the cover of every paper, every magazine, on the TV in 74, 75.
Everywhere.
He was kind of an icon in a way, a little bit. So yeah, I think that it's the same. It's almost like as well when they talk about McCoy, it's basically like McCoy was perp walked on the evening news. His perp walk was everywhere. I mean, obviously, all the witnesses were showing photos of McCoy, but they also saw video of the guy on the news. And, that's why another thing about McCoy, why it's just not good. All right. So, Jude, you have to defend.
Come on.
Oh, good one. Wolfgang Gossett. Wolfie.
Oh, okay. So, Wolfie Gossett, I think, is a very good one for a lot of reasons. There's one distinctive feature, again, which has come out, which Bill Mitchell has sworn by, is that Cooper had loose skin on his neck. And it's very distinctive in Gossett. And one thing that I want to make really, really clear is that throughout history, whenever criminals have been described, when they've been unapprehended, the description turned out to be correct. So the Bing sketch is more likely what Cooper looked like. The only slight problem with Gossett is that he has a bit of a larger nose, but he does have a narrow face. He does have darker skin and darker eyes in color footage. The guy was a bit of a crook and a liar in his later years. He was not a model citizen. He did a lot of swindles in terms of kind of like religion and faith and being a medium and stuff like that. So, a con and a grift were not outside of his grasp. He did confess to the crime to his son, Greg, who really, really believes that his father was D.B. Cooper and had kept some money in a lockbox. And I mean, as far as military, like, anybody that's in the military angle of D.B. Cooper, if I'm correct, I think Gossett served with distinction in the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army, and that is unbelievably rare.
Right. Oh, yes.
So,
yeah. As the Marines, yeah. So I guess Marines are a branch of the Navy, but yeah, the Marines, Air Force, and Army, all three.
So, I mean, there is no doubt that he would have the tactical know-how to plan the heist, to carry out the heist, to land on the ground with the money after the heist, and keep his mouth shut forever, which he didn't do. Obviously, he told his son. But as far as the being a kind of semi-troubled, shady, sinister kind of guy that would be capable, both in skill set and in arrogance, to do this, Gossett could do it, and he's on the fringes of the age bracket, 40 plus, but he certainly did look older.
Okay, so yeah, Gossett is all right. So I guess I have to attack Gossett. So the attack on Gossett, well, for one thing, I am not fooled by his resemblance to the sketch, because I think that the resemblance to the sketch, Gossett is a interesting case. There are a couple suspects like this. So here's what people usually see when they look at Gossett and the Cary Grant sketch, which was the second sketch, composite B, the final composite B. The issue is that, yeah, okay, we say people look at that and go, oh my God, that's amazing. But I think people are duped by the hair, because yeah, the hair looks exactly similar. But let's look at when you remove the hair. When you remove the hair, it's not so close. The eyes are set far apart. on the sketch. His nose is not as narrow as the nose. He doesn't have a really pouty lower lip, and his face is wider. All indications were that Cooper had this sort of strange looking narrow face. But Gossett doesn't have that, I don't think. We can see his face is kind of a square face a little bit in a way. So I don't see it. But like I said, I think people look at that and go, oh, the hairline looks great. But, so it makes them think that the overall is great. But I just don't see a lot there. But so to attack the guy, this is a guy who, he discussed the hijacking with his son, 2 different lawyers, apparently, or both his sons, I believe. He had 2 sons. He also talked about, he said he confessed to a couple of the lawyers. But Gossett, in fact, on my suspect matrix, Gossett's pretty low, actually. Gossett's got a 4, okay, which is in between William J. Smith and Walter Recca. So he's actually kind of low on my matrix there. So I don't think that Gossett counts really there. So just other ways to attack Gossett, just that he went back to work. He believe he went to law school after 71 and became a lawyer for a while. He was a public defender. Then he became a Catholic priest and did exorcisms. Just a real kind of a wild guy. And he's the exact type of person who you can say, he's a different kind of individual. He would have had the divergent thinking to be D.B. Cooper. But the problem is he's also someone who is susceptible to telling tall tales. And I firmly believe that, this guy hosted a paranormal show on the radio for years. Okay. This is a guy who is good at bullshitting, essentially, and could weave a good narrative. He also liked the limelight. His son, Greg Gossett, said that at one point, Greg won the state championship in Utah for some kind of track and field event and was actually on the news being interviewed. And his dad ran up and basically pushed Greg out of the way so he could be on camera. So Cooper, our notoriously shy skyjacker, would not have, I don't see Gossett doing that. And Gossett, so David Triol says Gossett was 5'8". I actually don't really know his size. There's a photograph here. So this photograph here is remarkable because it's actually, I believe it comes from November 5th or 6th of 71. So this is the same month as the hijacking. And we can see a photograph of him, but we can't tell how tall he is there. We don't know how tall these guys are. My take,
it looks quite stocky there.
Yeah, a little stocky. My take is that whenever you see photographs from the 70s and all these guys look the same size, I think most people are going to be about 5'9" or 5'10" back then. So my guess is that all these young ROTC guys are probably 5'9", 5'10", and he looks a little smaller than they are. Looks maybe about 5'8", which is what David Triol thought that Gossett was. So that's what I think. Let's see some questions. Let's see. Ryan, how much have you looked into non-U.S. suspects? I can't imagine anyone would ask for the money to be paid in U.S. currency that was from the U.S. Yeah, that's the one that makes me think that they may have been Canadian or Mexican by nationality, is the fact that we know that Cooper did put some sort of qualifier. It's unclear exactly what it was, but he either said U.S. currency or negotiable American currency, one of those two things. So he did put a qualifier on it. I dare say that I dare say that your average bank robber is just going to say, or average extortionist is just going to say, I want $2 million. Like I said, I want it in U.S. currency. That should be understood. Although then there are some people who say, well, there were the number of Cuban hijackers back then. Maybe they would want it in pesos or whatever the Cubans use. But I think that that is telling. And I know that we do have some Canadian Cooper sleuths who do go back and forth. I know Flyjack is one of them. One of our best sleuths is Canadian. And Tessa Lauren, another sleuth, is Canadian. And both of them have told me that because they go back and forth from Vancouver, Canada so often into the States, that they will have to specify what type of money they want. So that could possibly be a clue to Cooper being not an American. So, okay. Let's see. One more thing. DB Cooper's love child says, I believe someone inside the FBI was protecting Cooper. I do not. Go read 48,000 case files like I have, and you're going to say no. Okay. Let's see. Jude. Wait.
Oh, no, that's you. It's you. I defended Gossett.
All right. Nikki says, interesting point. I don't know. I believe Nikki. I believe his research. He's a good researcher. He says that the Towncraft tie was only sold in America. So, if true, that's a good pickup there, because I do think it was Cooper's tie. I think it was something he just had in his closet. Okay. So, okay, is it?
Yeah. Me and Nikki and me, we've talked about ties a lot, and with pennies, because it was a global brand. Yeah, the Towncraft was only in the United States, because there's some pennies ties. One of which I have is just a pennies tie that's not available in the US, and the reason why is because I actually got a cigarette burn on it whenever I was in America. And I was like, holy crap, this is the tie that matches the suit, and I couldn't get another one because it was only an EU model.
Yeah. Okay. And Uncle Jim here makes a point. He says that Canadians are easy to spot how they talk and phrase. Well, not Western Canadians. Okay. Western Canadians are more like they're more like Montana types. Tessa doesn't have a dramatic accent. The people who, the typical Canadian accent you think of is like Ontario. That's that. Oh, what are you talking about? Like, that's kind of the Ontario. It's my understanding. That's Toronto. That's that sort of, but Western Canada is its own separate animal there. Did lots of Canadians go across the border to buy stuff for cheaper in Vancouver, Canada, for example? Maybe. I'm not really sure on that.
Can I jump in on that one? Yeah. Because Nixon made a mess of the dollar and the Canadian dollar at that time in 1971, the Canadian dollar and the American dollar were almost 1 for 1, pound for pound, buck for buck. In 71, there was something to do with gold or something like that. It came up in my book research because my Cooper was Canadian. Right. And I was thinking, right, why would he not ask for it in Canadian dollars? So asking for it in American. Because it was exactly the same. Because if he had asked for 200 American, if he had done the hijacking a year before, it would have been worth nearly like 3 million Canadian, whereas it would have been worth 1 million Canadian a year after. Because I'm not American, don't know much about American history, but I know that Nixon ruined a lot of things, and he ruined the Canadian and the American dollar exchange rate around the 71 period.
Okay, let's hold off on the Nixon attacks. I actually like Nixon there. Let's see, but I guess the problem too about asking for Canadian currency, they would know you're Canadian probably as well. In fact, our Canadian hijacker, Paulsini, our Canadian parajacker, did ask for money in U.S. dollars. So there's that. Okay, go ahead.
Suppose U.S. dollars you can spend absolutely anywhere. Right. In the world, there's nowhere that doesn't take American dollars.
All right, it's the same as gold. It's a universal currency, and it was back then too. I would think. I mean, ever since America put their post World War II, I would think that the dollar was, ubiquitous across the world. All right, so it's my turn to defend. Oh, okay. I have to defend Joe Lakich. This is the suspect of Bill Rollins. Okay, Joe Lakich. Let me pull up Joe Lakich here. So this is Joe Lakich. So, okay. Defending Joe Lakich. Where would I start? Well, for one thing, he's swarthy. He's dark complected. He's got the olive complexion. You can see in this photograph here. He does have the complexion for Cooper. His hair is parted the right way. He's got the right amount of hair. This photograph looks to be about, I actually think this photograph is maybe late 50s. That he's a captain here. He was a veteran. He was a combat veteran. You can see in this photograph here on his left breast. He's got a CIB, that is a combat infantry badge, which is a very prestigious award in the military because it means that you have been shot at. You are not in the rear with the gear, as they say. So you have to come under fire. He believe he earned this during World War II. He was from Illinois, so he did have a neutral accent. His nose is not overly large. He's got a kind of a small nose there. He looks good, I would say. He would have been in a bad headspace. Let me just put it that way. So his daughter, Susan, was killed in what's called the November 58 incident, which was an incident at the Jacksonville airport where Susan, who had just had a child with her husband, they were estranged and her husband had some mental illness and kidnapped her and hijacked a plane with her on it. And the FBI, instead of the family were saying, look, this guy's got mental illness. Let us talk to him. We can talk him down. We've done this before. And the FBI did not listen. And instead they shot the tires out. They cornered the guy. He ended up killing the pilot, killing her, and then killing himself. It was a catastrophe. And it was just an ugly scene. And that happened earlier that month. So that was November 4th or 5th of 71 in Jacksonville, Florida. His daughter was killed. She was, I believe, in her early 20s. And it was his only child, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was his only child. So he lost his only child. So his headspace would have been in a bad spot. So possibly he could have snapped and had a falling down Michael Douglas moment, if you've seen that movie, and went and hijacked a plane. But yeah, Joe Lakich, swarthy, right age, bad headspace, combat veteran, nerves of steel, military lifer. All right, Jude, go ahead.
Okay, Joe Lakich, and yeah, that's a really sad story. And his daughter was killed in that hijacking, who had a little baby of her own. So he was a grandpa at the time, and he raised the little girl as his own.
Yep.
After that time, so Joe Lakich, only a matter. How long was it before? It was weeks before Norjack, or
weeks. It was the same month. It was earlier that month. Yeah.
It was weeks before. I think it was early November. Mm-hmm. And this was a man in the throes of grief who, only days after his daughter's burial, decides to go and hijack a plane and leave this baby behind. So let's pretend that Lakich was Cooper, okay? Let's just say he was, right? So at the time, Lakich had family and other friends, and he had a baby that he had to care for, which was his late murdered daughter's by the FBI. And this hijacking happens. Surely somebody would have said, wow, Joe wasn't around that day, or wow, I was holding that baby that night and not him. Somebody somewhere would have said something. His daughter had just been killed, and there are not many cases where the FBI lost a wrongful death suit. This is one of them, ever, of all time.
First time, yeah.
The first, and as far as I could see, just that tidbit, how many other wrongful death cases had the FBI lost? And I could only find 2 other ones.
Yeah. Well, because remember, a wrongful death suit against the FBI would be filed in federal court. So they're protecting their own a little bit there. Yeah. And they lost. And they lost. So.
And they lost. And I mean, how he came to the mainstream consciousness was by remote viewing. Was by Bill Rollins, and there was a remote viewing thing. It's on the Mountain News. That Bill had written an article in Bruce Smith, the Mountain News. I mean, remote viewing. Yes, I know that people say it was used in Stargate and stuff like that. I mean, it is absolute woo-woo. It's not a real credible DNA specific way to ascertain if someone was D.B. Cooper. This guy who had just had his daughter murdered by the law is not going to go only days after his daughter's burial to inflict possibly more pain and leave this baby who was already left without her mother without a grandfather now and a main figure. It just does not fit. No matter how hard you hammer Lakage, the man wasn't Cooper.
Yeah, I agree, and that's the issue. Yeah, it's just preposterous to me to think that somebody who, it was actually October 4th of 71, so it happened a month earlier. But it is preposterous to me to think that someone who lost a daughter in a hijacking is then going to go threaten other men's daughters in the same crime. And the thing is, Rollins says that Lakage, what a great way to get revenge on the FBI. Well, no, you're not. How is that inconveniencing? I mean, how is that revenge against the FBI? That's taking money from Northwest Orient via an insurance company, right? It's not, that's just not, the revenge against the FBI was beating them in federal court, which is what he did. So, and I just don't like Lakage. Also, Lakage has no history with aviation. In fact, I was looking at this photograph here of him, and one thing he lacks on his uniform is jump wings. He was in the infantry. So he was not a paratrooper of any sort. He would have been proudly wearing jump wings, I assure you, if he had earned them. And he was not in the paratroopers. He was in the infantry. So there's no connection to aviation there at all. And, this is an aviation-related crime. There is some connection between Cooper and aviation. There just has to be.
Yeah, I was going to end that picture of Lakage just there. Is that the Normandy badge on the crease of the photograph above the kind of swords, the battle, the one you just mentioned? Is that the Normandy patch up there? It does look like it somewhat. Was he Normandy?
Where? I don't know what you're talking about.
On his left lapel.
Oh, on his lapel.
Left.
So yeah. No, the Normandy badge would have been a ribbon that would have been above that comment. The Normandy badge, I think, actually, let me see what that is.
Because I mean, not as Cooper, but Lakage it's a very interesting story.
Right.
He's a very interesting guy for all the right reasons, that he fought the law and he won.
No, so that might be in England. That might be in the UK. So in America, when you get a badge or whatever, it's going to be in the form of a ribbon.
Right. Okay.
And these ribbons. So when you see these photographs, these guys with all these huge ribbons on them, right? That's what he would have worn. But he was in World War II, though. He was in Europe, so he did fight in Europe, and that's where he earned his combat infantry badge. Yeah, exactly. DB Cooper himself in the thing says Normandy was a rectangle badge. Yeah, it's a little ribbon thing. Okay. Let's see. It is Jude's turn to defend the Zodiac Killer. Okay.
Flip.
Yeah. No.
I'm using the flip card.
You bastard. Oh, damn it. Okay. Well. Okay. I will give this an honest effort. How about that? I'll give it an honest effort. So, Zodiac Killer was obviously a serial killer who was he was a bad hombre, whoever he was. He was a sick son of a bitch. And if you go into the darkest realms of DB Cooperdom, you will find that you could make an argument that Cooper is damn near as sick, really. When you threaten to murder someone, if you threaten to murder a plane load full of people for your own profit, you've got some issues going on in your head. And Cooper's bomb certainly had the possibility of being very real. We're not sure of that, but he made it far more realistic than it needed to be. And in fact, he made it realistic enough to where when it was replicated by a group of ordnance specialist Marines, it detonated when they made a replica of how it was described. So it could have been a functional bomb. We know that the battery that he used, which was a D-cell battery from back then, did have enough juice in it to detonate a blasting cap of dynamite. So Cooper's bomb very much could have been real. And as I said, it didn't even need to look real. In fact, Cooper would have had the same effect. The same exact result in this hijacking would have occurred if Cooper had literally just said, there is a bomb in this briefcase and never showed it to him. Nothing changes, in my opinion, with this hijacking at all if Cooper just said he had a bomb. It didn't need to be, he didn't even need to show it to them. So the fact that he showed it to them and the fact that it was, Tina Mucklow points out one of the really interesting things that I like about Tina was her father was an electrician. So she grew up around, that sort of stuff. And her description of the bomb is pretty detailed. In fact, she even mentioned that the wires that Cooper were holding on to had the ends stripped, exposing the copper. Which is what you would need to do if you were making a real bomb, certainly to have the contact. So very much, why would you do that? Why? That is a detail that is very unnecessary if it was a fake bomb. So that's what I think. So Zodiac was a crazy person, but yeah, that's all I got. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have to start with the physical description. So, okay. So what you need to do with this description is the opposite of this description is DB Cooper. Right. So, white adult male, blue eyes, around 5'8", stocky build, around 220 pounds, full crew cut brown hair, forehead wrinkles, driving a white Chevrolet Impala and wearing large horn-rimmed glasses. Which is basically the physical description for the kid that in your class that had all the allergies. DB Cooper was a tall, 50-something, swarthy-skinned, thin, athletic, gaunt. He was a big, lanky, awkward, geeky old man with balding hair. And what the Zodiac Killer was very proficient in telling people about his crimes, all his letters. This is the Zodiac speaking. So the Zodiac Killer actually claimed lots of shit that he didn't do. Like in his last letter, it was like 37-0. So he claimed to have killed 37 people. I mean, surely he could have claimed this cool hijacking as it would have been back then. He didn't claim it. Now, there were DB Cooper letters that some Zodiac supporters of DB Cooper like to say, but the Zodiac, actually, Tom Voigt pointed this out to me. He wrote all his letters with the same blue felt tip pen. And I was like, real, that is strange. And look at the letters, they're online. They're all written in the same blue felt tip pen. The Cooper letters are written on a typewriter. I mean, the Zodiac Killer had a very, very clear MO, which was he wanted to attack and or murder women or couples. I suppose the outlier there being Paul Stein. But this was a cold-blooded killer who acted alone on land.
As well, I mean, he was a terrorist.
He was
doing it to terrorize the community. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, he threatened a bomb in a letter, but it's just the Zodiac Killer did not look like the guy, and I'll keep repeating it throughout this, is that the physical description of Cooper is right. Now, that description of the Zodiac Killer, when unmasked or if unmasked, that will be what the Zodiac Killer looked like. When we find out what Cooper looked like, he will look very similar to the Bing sketch. That's what he will look like. And, the Zodiac description, the main one was taken from a bunch of kids in a house across the street in the dark. And even Brian C. Hartnell was able to describe him. Mike Mageau was able to describe him. So you have three witnesses, three different places. With Cooper, the blessing that we have is that he was seen in a well-lit airport and in a small confined space of a well-lit airplane. So the description of Cooper
for an extended amount of time.
Yeah. Now, an airplane. Now, and this is another reason, again, plug for the DB Cooper conference. Go and buy your ticket, right? What you do is you get on that plane. Now, I've been on a 727 quite a few times. I mean, Ireland's a small island. That's what the 727 was designed for, like a commuter plane. It is very small. It's well lit. You would not mistake. And by the way, even for judging height, it is, I mean, the fuselage is about just over 6 feet in height. You kind of have to walk a bit like this inside it. It's very, very small. Cooper's description is right. The Zodiac Killer wasn't Cooper because he would have told the San Francisco Chronicle. I mean, the guy pretty much told the San Francisco Chronicle everything, bar what he had for breakfast that morning, for years.
Right. Yeah. It's a silly. I mean, I mean, I don't think anybody really thinks it's Zodiac. That was more of a for fun thing. So, but okay. So because you flipped it, you're still gonna have to defend somebody next. So you're going to defend. Okay, so I guess we're getting our gags out. So you have to defend the Unabomber. So, all right.
Well,
back-to-back gags.
Well, so the Unabomber actually had experience of using live explosives. I mean, Cooper had a bomb. His weapon of choice was a bomb. The Unabomber's weapon of choice was indeed a bomb. There's a lot of stock incorrectly placed in the grudge that Cooper had, but I mean, Cooper's grudge is very, I suppose, it's hard to pin down, but Ted Kaczynski did have a grudge against commercialization, the environment, industrialism, and so on and so forth. So I mean, and I can't recall if it was before 71 or slightly afterward, where he did place live explosives on an airplane. So he did do that. And with Cooper being described as a geeky old man, now that's one descriptor. Another descriptor is refined. Now with Ted Kaczynski, although used his intellect for evil, a highly intelligent mathematics and physics professor, he was remarkably intelligent. What a waste of brain and skin the guy was. But I mean, with Cooper, he was a bad guy, whether you like it or not. And Ted Kaczynski was a bad guy who could have done this. Where I think a lot of stock placed on this badass paratrooper type of guy, where Ted Kaczynski, to do something like this, is not outside the realms of possibility, just by even the way that he carried himself. He was quite refined. He clearly had no fear, was very sociopathic, clearly lacked empathy, and I think those are a lot of the things that Cooper was. That's all I have.
Okay. All right. Well, for one thing, he was, I want to say that he was maybe 28 at the time, so he's young to begin with. But hell, I mean, the instant killer, I mean, even just the complete non-starter for Ted Kaczynski. He was also 5'8" too, but the non-starter, I mean, is early 90s, so 20-something years after the hijacking, the man has this mop on his head. I mean, that is a turban, right? Look at that hair. Like, how could someone who has a receding hairline and was called balding by Alice Hancock have a mop on his head 20-something years later without going to Turkey and getting some hair plugs? Like, this is absurd. That nose is ugly as well. You know, just too wide. And really, his face is stocky looking. There's no, like, it's just too square, sort of, in my opinion. But that hair is way too much hair. Nose is too wide. And Ted would have blown the plane up on his way out if he had been Cooper and destroyed the evidence. He would have just blown up the plane on his way out. But there is a Cooper sleuth named Joe Holloway. And Joe, you've got me blocked for some reason on Facebook. I don't know what I did to you. I guess I just attacked Unabomber the wrong way one day. You blocked me. But Joe Holloway's got he makes a good argument for Kaczynski. It's funny that in Ted's little shack, there actually was, I believe you can see a parachute in there, which is weird. Or believe that's what it is. There's a parachute in there. So there is that. But really, yeah, the bomb thing, and Ted did try to blow it up, but he's too short, too young, has way too much hair. His nose is too big. He was Nemo points out that he was a ideological terrorist. His motives were not money. Clearly, this guy did not give a shit about money. Material things mattered not to this man. So why would he have done that. Yes, the Uni-Cooper theory, there's no Uni-Cooper. Okay, so I have to defend. Oh, well, okay. Milton Vordal. All right. Well, golly, that's easy for me. Okay. Well, I guess that the best way to defend Milton Vordal is just to say that, well, let me pull up Milton there, is just to say that he has the best connection to the tie particles of anybody who's known at this point. Everything on the tie were things that this guy worked with. In fact, the titanium antimony, if it is what it is, and it could be traced to rim crew, was invented by Milton Vordal. That was his baby. No, and titanium was his baby. He was one, and still is considered one of the leading experts in all of history on titanium alloys. So he was a true genius. When we talk about divergent thinking, the FBI files, the profile that Charlie Farrell made said that Cooper exhibited extreme inventiveness, which Vordal was an inventor. He had 80-something inventions to his name. So this is definitely something that he could have come up with. We know that he was unemployed at the time. He had lost his job in August of 71 during the layoffs at TiMet in Nevada, where he was working, fired by a man named Don Cooper, interestingly enough. But he was unemployed at the time. He was the right height. He was 5'10" and a half, so he's tall enough. He was swarthy. He had this this dark skin, of course. There's just a lot of things on Milton. I mean, we can go on forever, really, on Vordal. A lot of things that are good for him, I would say. That I just like the swarthiness and the inventiveness, I would say, is really the main thing for him. And his nose is the right size. He's got the hair. He was balding at the time. And he was a misanthrope as well. The pouty lip is a main thing for him too. He's got this pouty. He really has the bizarre lower lip that you want in Cooper. I would say that it's a good thing. He knew the area, but didn't live there, which is an important distinction, because I don't think Cooper was from the area. I don't think he lived in the area, because you run the risk of people spotting you in the airport and saying, "Oh yeah, I saw Bill at the airport," right? But he knew the area. So I do think, and he knew the 727 well. He did go to Seattle frequently at Boeing and was a consultant for Boeing. His hairline's right. 4-hour drive from the drop zone is a good distance where you're close enough, but not too close. Familiarity with the area, and mainly was a misanthrope. This guy was a real jerk. Essentially, he was not a good guy. I wouldn't say. He was a real headache. Did not like people. He referred to humans as Homo sapiens. He did not think that humans deserved much consideration until they earned it. So, yeah, he could have made a bomb. I mean, what we know from his grandson, he did make explosives. He was able to make homemade explosives. He can make anything. Look, Milton Vordal made contact lenses in the 1960s for his children. Who in the hell does that? And who the hell puts that in their eyes? But his kids did. So, yeah, Milton is a solid suspect for sure, and that's what I can say about old Milton there. So go ahead and attack Milton there.
Well, so Milton Vordal, I call the patron saint of Hold My Beer, where he just invented everything. Like, I am sure that guy, and invented like hairbrushes with unicorn hair. I don't know, but yeah, we got really down and out on Strand and Vincent Peterson, and the fact of the matter is that Milton Vordal is not far behind. I mean, he is not far behind for a lot of reasons, because with these tie particles, there is a falsehood that is generally accepted in Cooperville, which is that that tie had to come from someone that worked in Remcrew, where it is very easy to state that that collection of particles on the tie left behind by DB Cooper, right? Now, even calling it DB Cooper's tie, who knows, right? Who knows if it was his tie in the long term? We don't know. We probably never will know. But that tie could have been an employee of Lockheed Martin, of TIMET, of anywhere else. There's another place in Columbus, Ohio. I can't remember the name. But the only thing that's tying, pun intended, Milton Vordal as being DB Cooper is the fact that he was at Remcrew, he wore a tie, he smoked, and that's it. I mean, the guy has no real aviation experience. He did not use a parachute. And with Milton Vordal, yes, if you're getting into the realm of, well, he may have did X, Y, or Z without anybody knowing, it's just a bit of a flimsy argument. He's a nerd. I love him. I mean, that's a great view. I would love to sit opposite the guy and have a drink with him. I think we'd get on very well. I don't like people. He doesn't like people. He likes to complain in public, like I do. But there's absolutely nothing tying him to the crime. The FBI didn't investigate him. The only thing that's putting him in the door as DB Cooper is that stupid little rag of a tie that everybody thinks had to have come from Remcrew. We just don't know if it came from Remcrew. Remcrew weren't the only people that were using titanium antimony. Yes, does Vordal have the patent for whatever it's for titanium and antimony or whatever it may be? I mean, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. The guy has no motive. He has no link, no criminal links, no criminal record that we know of. Yes, he was misanthropic, but I mean, it's a case of, yes, he looks like the guy a bit, and he's a bit of a dick. I mean, was Cooper a bit of a dick? Yeah. But was Milton Vordal that much of a dick that he would do this? I don't think so.
Yep, that's good. Good enough. Point Nemo here says, "What's up with this guy's dislike of the tie?" I mean, look, I'll defend that. I mean, I know you can. I'll let you answer it for yourself. But I'm not gonna put words in your mouth. But I'll say this. I mean, the problem with the tie is that while I do think it was Cooper's, it doesn't tell us. It may not tell us a whole lot. I mean, there may have been a lot of people who were around these types of things. Not a whole lot, but it's I guess an issue too is that it was Cooper's, but for how long was it Cooper's? Meaning, like, I know that in my closet, I actually have a few ties of my brother's. Okay, so it could have been a brother. It could have been whoever's tie it was. It could have been his brother's. We just don't know. But the tie is valuable, but it's in a way connecting a suspect to the tie isn't as well. It's a lead, but it's I don't know. I'll let you speak. What is up with your dislike of the tie there?
Because it doesn't tell us anything. The only thing it tells us is that there's some particles on it. Yeah, was it the tie worn by the hijacker of 305? I don't think anybody's gonna take that to court and win or lose. I mean, yes, that was Cooper took the tie off to exit because obviously didn't want the tie hitting him in the freaking face or blocking his goggles. Taking the tie off for a skydive makes perfect sense. I mean, for it to rip off or tear his shirt, I mean, but it doesn't tell us anything. I think the tie has been somewhat weaponized, the same as the way the Edo shawl in the Ripper case has been weaponized against Aaron Kosminski, who was not Jack the Ripper, where there's, I mean, whenever you have, researchers who are very vocal and who are very well known saying this tie had to come from Remcrew, we just don't know. We just don't know. If I was offered to take my life savings to the bank that tie came from an employee of Remcrew, I wouldn't do the bet because we don't know. I mean, when Cooper's unearthed, he could have been Lockheed Martin. We just don't know, and I think it's a vessel for presumption because all it is a cheap little black tie with some metal dust on it, and that's all it is. I don't think we will find out anything more.
But it has value, though.
It does.
Because it is the only thing we have that we know was owned by the guy. So it can at least tell us, perhaps. I mean, it's a lead. I mean, it's like anything else. It's a lead. Now, whether the lead leads to something valuable or quantifiable, it's not like the William J. It's not like the Max Gunther book. It's not that, because when there's no connection at all to that. But this does have a real connection to Cooper. So, and I do think that the connections, the fact that the particles do line up with aerospace issue things, is something there. I mean, it would be like this: if the tie had, fertilizer and farm stuff on it, then we go, okay, well, what's the connection there? But it has aerospace connections to it, and this was an aeronautical crime. So I mean, that seems to relate a little bit. But the problem is we don't know. I would put more stock into. I would say this though: if you found me a good suspect who had ties to metallurgy, he gets bonus points. Would you agree?
Yeah.
If you found otherwise, if Skip Hall, for example, now look, Skip Hall.
Yeah.
We know that Skip Hall now, for certain, it's not in the. I don't believe it was in the Skip Hall book, but John Limbach does know for certain now that Skip Hall did work for Northrop Aviation in 1971 and lost his job the same year. So, and he was middle management at Northrop Aviation Construction. So he was around titanium things that were being produced. So you get bonus points, right? But
I agree with that. At the minute, it's the only thing that we have. And yes, there's titanium, antimony, and other particles on the tie, but it's not a fleck of patented Testarossa red Ferrari paint where we know that DB Cooper worked for Ferrari because a fleck of their patented paint is on the tie.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's where I differ. And that's what frustrated me with Eric. Eric's approach to this case was Eric would, and look, we have a good suspect coming up later who Eric flat out dismissed when the family member contacted Eric. Eric said, go away. And because there's no tie particle connection. I would never, ever discount a suspect for not having a tie particle connection. That is absurd. Because
what if their brother or their father, that's their father's tie, or, right. I mean, and he took it out that morning.
I mean, I don't like the thrift store argument because, again, a tie that's that cheap that has holes in it is not going to be sold at a thrift store. But again, it could have been a brother's or whatever. But I will not kill a suspect because of no tie particle connection. But you do get bonus points.
No.
Fair?
Yeah, that is fair.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Jude, you have to defend. Okay, you're defending. Woo! Bless your heart, as we say in the South. You're defending Walter Pekka. All right.
Well, Walter Recca could use a parachute, which a lot of suspects that we know for a fact that this guy completed at least one skydive. And if you look in the Cooper world, there are not every single person that's given a lot of airtime completed a parachute jump. We know that Walter Recca did. He was a smoke jumper. He did have the cojones to do something like this. I mean, he again was a crook. He had a very shady past. He alleged that he was a spy for the CIA, the KGB. He was a teller of tales. He was in Cle Elum that night. He was around in the reasonable vicinity. I mean, he was closer than a lot of other suspects, especially those that live on the East Coast. So he was closer. He was someone with was very loose with the truth a lot of the time. He confessed to the crime. Did he get some details wrong? Yes, he did. But it is not uncommon for crooks and criminals who are confessing to their crimes many decades later to get some details wrong. For a famous example of that is in the television show Mindhunter with Ed Kemper, the serial killer, the giant co-ed killer. He, over the years, had did everything he could to tell the authorities things about his crimes, but there were things that he got wrong, and he absolutely was the perpetrator of the crimes. Where with Walter Recca, who gave his confession, and was it 2012 or 13? I mean, we're talking 40 years later, 4 decades later. There is a big possibility that over time he just simply got some details wrong over that time. And yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, so Recca, this is, as we say in basketball, this is a layup. Look, folks, I mean, this guy, Recca's nose was smashed with a frying pan. I mean, look at that nose. That's a nose that would make a boxer, blush. It's bad. The guy was fair-skinned, blue-eyed, or maybe light-eyed. Just a real clown of an individual. The main thing, though, Recca is insta-killed. If he's not insta-killed by his, there's nothing about this guy that is angular, narrow-faced, skinny little nose. I mean, there's just not there. But if you needed anything, Walter Recca said that for one thing, Walter Recca in his confession says that he was planning to jump out the side door, and that Tina Mucklow said, "Oh, no, go out the back. It's safer." Like, what? But the main thing is that he said they jumped at Clay Elum, Washington, which is 130 miles from the drop zone. If you look at a map, that is somebody. That's like if an event happened in Philadelphia, and some guy said, "Oh, no, it actually happened in Washington D.C." You're like, "What are you talking about? It's ridiculous." It's like the distance from Belfast to Liverpool or something. I mean, it's preposterous to think that it would be like that. So yeah, Recca is not even. And look at this too. I mean, the guy was a liar. So let's look at this is his alleged KGB ID. His name. Look at his signature there. It's Walter Recca. So are you going to, and here's an actual KGB ID, and here's his phony one, right, that he got online somehow or from wherever, not online, but he had one made. You're not using your real name if you're a double agent for the Soviets. Like, I mean, this is come on.
Traitor?
Yeah, right. Traitor, like executed. Like,
was that punishable by death at the time in the United States being KGB?
I mean, hell yeah, it was. They killed the damn, was it the Rosenbergs or whoever it was in the 40s for being Soviet, and they weren't even actual. I think it turned out they weren't even Soviets. No, there's just I can't even. Recca is just stupid. I mean, it's remarkable that somehow the worst suspects can get 3 books. There are 3 Recca books. Okay. 3 Recca books. There's a 4-hour documentary that's good actually about Recca. Yeah. It's just, and it's sad because I wish that Recca had, I wish his confession was more authentic sounding, because I do like the sound of it. If you watch the video of Recca, or if you listen to Recca's confession, it's really cool because it is kind of this Midwestern guy describing, and then I did this and that. It's kind of cool sounding, but then he says, but then just the thing, 4-hour documentary around Recca. Where is this at? Somebody's asking. Can you
get it on Amazon?
Yeah, I don't know the name of it. It's on Amazon. I believe it's like DB Cooper, exposed or something. Let me see I'm gonna type in what it's called.
I can't remember either, but
DB Cooper, the real story. Yeah, DB Cooper, the real story. It's on Amazon for like $5. You can buy it, and it's worth watching. So
it's like the classic saying: the reason why Walter Recca still creeps into the conversation now and again. It's a case of, the creakiest gate will always get the most oil. So with a few kind of vocal advocates of Walter Reca and Walter Reca's crappy story, people still keep him in the public domain.
It's the same way with McCoy and Rackstraw, and we made a agreement at the start of this. We expunged, for those wondering, we expunged Reca, we expunged Rackstraw and McCoy from this game today. So we're not doing them. Okay.
Because they were ruled out using forensic evidence.
Right. And they were ruled out. Yeah. So we're not doing them. So, okay. Reca. So my turn.
You have to defend.
I have to defend. Okay. Well, let's see. Dwayne Weber. Okay. All right. Well, I can defend Dwayne. I can do that. So, for one thing, allegedly, Dwayne is a deathbed confessor, and deathbed confessions legally are not hearsay, and they're not treated as hearsay in court. So, in the American judicial system, a deathbed confession is a hearsay exception. For those who don't know exactly what hearsay is, hearsay is a statement made out of court by somebody who is not there to verify its reliability as coming from their mouth, essentially. But a deathbed confession is a loophole there. And really, interestingly enough, as much as we talk about false confessions, I only know of 2 deathbed confessions to being D.B. Cooper that are in the FBI files. And that's Dwayne Weber and a guy named Arthur Durham. So Dwayne is unique in that. And I do believe, I feel like so Joe Weber is such an odd character that part of me does wonder if she made that up. But she literally spent a quarter century, defending this story to the nth degree every day, all day. So I think she believed it. Dwayne was 48 years old at the time, which is the exact age that the FBI thinks Cooper was, or the approximate age. He looks, if you take away his ears, which did stick out, he is a good match for the sketch, actually. Or he's a good match for Cooper. He's tall, he's swarthy, he's got really olive skin. He has hair that, Robert Gregory said that he had Marcelled hair, and he does have Marcel hair. And Hal Williams said, the gate agent said that Cooper had slightly curly hair. It had some kink in it, they called it. So that's Dwayne's got that. And also, Ralph Himmelsbach liked Dwayne Weber a good bit because Ralph's theory was that Cooper was a ex-con, some guy who had been in prison, who just didn't give a shit anymore, who was out to make a big score, saw the Paulsini story, may have been a paratrooper in the war or something like that, and was like, hey, maybe I'll do one last score. My life's already over. I'm a felon. I'm ruined, yada, yada. So Dwayne certainly fits that profile. He did have connections to that area somewhat. And I would just say for anybody, I've said this a million times, for anybody who is interested in Dwayne Weber, go look up the Vortex episodes with Darren where he talks to Tim Collins. They're very good. He is a master storyteller, this Tim Collins guy. He will make you think that Dwayne Weber was Cooper. There is a actually a good explanation for the Tina Bar money. It's one of the better ones, honestly, is that in the Weber story in 1980, or maybe it was 1979, Dwayne was an insurance salesman. And but this has been verified that this did happen, that this trip happened, that he was sent to the conference of this insurance company, and it was in Seattle, I believe. And they drove from where they were living at the time in Missouri or somewhere or maybe it was Colorado. I think they were living in Colorado. Yeah, they were living in Colorado at the time. They drove from Colorado to Seattle. And on the way there, they stopped for a day in Portland. And Dwayne said, I have to go do some stuff. And he left and he came back. And the story is that they stayed at a place called the Red Lion, which is on the Columbia River there in Portland, a hotel that is right on the river. And that Dwayne had a bag of trash or a paper bag or something, and he threw it into the river. And Joe got on his ass and said, Dwayne, you're littering. What are you doing? And he said, oh, don't worry about it. And that the story, I believe, that was told that Tim Collins figured out somehow or thought about is that in 1980, that's when Dwayne went to go get the money. And some of the money had spoiled. He had buried it in a 5-gallon like bucket. Okay. And had buried it. And some of the money at the top had gotten spoiled by drainage or seepage or whatever. And that's the money that he got rid of. He just threw it into the river. And that's the money that wound up on Tina Bar. And hey, money does not, we know that money bundles don't float, but maybe if they're in a bag of some sort, it would have at least carried it a little ways before sinking. Maybe there was some water, maybe there's some air in the bag or something. So it's possible. DB Cooper on here says, Ryan, do we know if Tina or Flo were allowed to listen to the audio of Dwayne? I don't know about that. And in fact, I don't know that the FBI ever, in fact, well, we have the FBI files on Dwayne. I don't believe that any audio of Dwayne talking was ever given to the FBI, but we do have in the Tim Collins episodes. It's interesting. There is audio of Dwayne. Joe recorded an argument they had while he was in jail. He had been arrested for something, and that she recorded him calling her from jail, and he was bitching at her about stuff. And so it is interesting to hear Dwayne's accent. So that's it. So that's kind of a treat. In fact, hearing, let's see, of the Cooper suspects, let me do this for a second. So of the Cooper suspects, whose voices we have heard, we've heard Gossett's, we've heard Rackstraw's, we've heard Dwayne's, we've heard Rekka.
Skip.
Yeah, we've heard Skip. Good point. And I can't think of anybody else who we have audio of them talking. Let me think. Obviously, the Unabomber is not a real suspect, but we have him talking. Let me think. Yeah, Howard Hunt. Obviously, we have him talking.
Sheridan Peterson.
Yes. Good. Hey, thank you. I knew there was somebody missing. Yeah, Sheridan Peterson. And that's it. I can't think of anybody else that we have audio of. Maybe somebody in the chat can help us out, but I think that's it. Okay.
Howard Hunt.
Well, yeah, I mentioned him. Yeah, Howard Hunt. Yeah. Okay, and let's see. Jude, attack Dwayne Weber.
Okay, Dwayne Weber was a criminal who had a really, really hard time staying out of prison and getting arrested and being known to the criminal justice system and parole officers and everything else. Like, a lot of law enforcement were on his ass most of his adult life to nearly right up to the very end. But with Dwayne Weber, I mean, he's very distinctive in body, presence, and voice. I would absolutely believe if I heard that recording of Dwayne Weber's voice, he does not have an undiscernible accent. If you gave me 10 choices and said, which one is Dwayne Weber, I would be able to pick Dwayne Weber again, 100%. His voice is very commanding and distinctive. He is not soft-spoken at all. He clearly had issues with his temper. I mean, if we look at what Norjack is, it's a very highly pressurized situation where Cooper was one of two things. He was either sociopathically calm or he was under the influence of drugs of some kind to keep him down. And Dwayne was a very emotional person and prone to outbursts, as per Tim Collins' story. He has very distinctive physical characteristic are his pointed ears, which not a single person in any of their 302s that saw Cooper, whether it was face on or sitting down or standing up, mentioned those ears. Absolutely none of them. And no parachute experience. Now, what I will make an interesting point is that, with Dwayne Webber, he's almost so bad that he's good. It's like, I think personally, even though I have to attack the guy, is that whenever Cooper is unearthed, he will be a lot closer to Dwayne Webber than, let's say, someone like Ted Braden. I think,
yeah,
I think that's what we're looking for. And in my opinion, if you want a Cooper suspect that's the closest to Martin McNally, it would be Dwayne.
yeah.
Like their personalities are very, very similar. But I think with Dwayne Webber, he's not Blendy McNobody. He just had an awful problem just standing out. And he was just this big force of nature, which Cooper wasn't. I mean, Dwayne was a big, barrel-chested, social, loud kind of guy, and Cooper just sat there like this, like a coward, smoking his cigarettes and sort of talking now and again with his hand in a briefcase. It's just the guy that the passengers and crew of 305 saw do not resemble Dwayne, and Dwayne wasn't really great at hiding his identity. It just spilled out because he couldn't help himself. So I can't imagine him getting through his life without mentioning anything. He was caught trying to get a fake driver's license. Whether I think there's a couple of check fraud and stuff like that. He just wasn't great at hiding his identity, and would have been caught. He probably in later years had every opportunity to confess to law enforcement, to kind of as a bargaining chip for the crimes that we know for a fact he committed. I mean, confessing to Cooper would be a fantastic bargaining chip for the guy.
Kool-Aid packets apparently is what he was doing. At Piggly Wiggly in Jacksonville, Florida, was his last crimes. He was shot, and he was caught doing that.
He had every opportunity. He had every opportunity to confess to law enforcement to avoid other jail time. He was in jail after 71.
Oh yeah.
So he could have said, "Well, I don't really want to go to jail, but I did this other thing. If I tell you all about it, can we work something out here?" I mean, that is the best plea deal chip that you could possibly have in your arsenal.
Well, sure. It's like the guys who, what was it? The guys who would, I think the Gardner heist people, a lot of those mafia types would steal art as a bargaining chip, I believe. Yeah. So they would say, okay, well, you want this priceless art back. I know where it is. And if they got arrested for something else, and it actually worked. Like there is legitimately guys would get out of prison because they knew where priceless art was that had been stolen. And the thought was that maybe the Gardner heist could have been something like that, or they would have kept some. But yeah, Dwayne, I like what you're saying there about Dwayne's personality. That's a really, a bit of a loser type. Yeah, I like that. So, okay, your turn you defend.
I'm going to say there's a point there from DB Cooper himself. No offense to Ryan or Jim, but Tim Collins was the best podcast on Darren's channel. Totally agree.
I agree. Yes.
Totally agree.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the best episodes in the whole series.
And they're long too. Yeah. It's like 10 hours.
It's 3 parts. 3 parts, are they not? There's several parts as well. Fantastic. Absolutely great. Not Cooper, but still a great story.
Yes. I advise everyone to go listen to it. It will make it. Tim Collins is a real disappointment to me. Is that Tim Collins clearly is he does a lot of research. He is passionate about it. He's a smart guy. I believe that he was into basically scamming casinos. He was maybe a card counter like Eric, perhaps. I think that he was maybe Nikki knows more than I do. But I believe Tim was some kind of Vegas gambler, cheater, not a cheater, but some of these guys who kind of had the game system. It may have been blackjack, like Eric. I think blackjack's the one that you can do that on. But he was some kind of a gambler of some sort, but it's a very smart guy and never played in the Vortex. He was on the Drop Zone back in the day, but that's about it. He never did the Cooper Facebook group, never did anything. And even Darren mentions that that, that once the podcasts were over, Tim Collins just ghosted him, just gone. And then he would show back up a year later. Hey, I want to do another episode. Sure, we'll do it. And then ghosted again. So, it's pretty interesting. So, okay, you defend. Good enough. Jason Langseth.
Well,
okay.
Jason Langseth is almost perfect. So as far as the descriptors for DB Cooper, they're all there. Narrow face, balding hair, thin nose, large lower lip. He's tall. He was practicing night jumps in the lead up to the skyjacking.
Yeah.
Now, I know that a lot of people will say, oh, but skydiving was the Wild West back then. The Wild West, skydiving being the Wild West, it doesn't mean it was lawless. It wasn't complete bandit country, but night jumps were exceptionally rare.
They still are.
And were organized in time. Are really rare. I don't think I'd ever want to do one, ever, for any reason. This guy was just practicing them off his own volition. He had a lot of strange financial dealings. He was getting these strange checks from Canada every month for years. He just seemed like this smooth, swindling skydiving, had a history of fraud. I mean, as far
as the FBI, let's not forget.
Lying to the FBI pursued him for decades to try and interview him, and he changed his story multiple times. I don't think, even at this point, even though the case is closed and not closed at the same time, that he has not been ruled out by anybody. And I have never heard a convincing argument against Jason Langseth being DB Cooper. If it was unearthed that Langseth was DB Cooper, I don't think anyone in this place would be surprised at all for any reason. I think Ryan is going to have an awful time trying to argue against him. He seems to match everything. He is a nondescript, sort of refined fraudster type who was practicing jumping at night, which it is very, very common in a lot of crimes. And Bonnie and Clyde famously did it, practicing the getaway from the bank they were going to do. Practicing getaways and escapes. I mean, a lot of heists have done that. And I mean, as far as a reasonable hypothesis of rehearsal for escape, Jason Langseth did that, and there's nobody else in the Cooper Kingdom that we know in the lead up could be interpreted as practicing the skydive escape that Norjack ultimately was. So he's still not been ruled out. He's been tested for DNA multiple times, but unfortunately the physical evidence is kind of contaminated, and I don't think technology can really grasp it right at this second. But I still stand by, I want E. Howard Hunt to be DB Cooper, but if you were to really push me, who do you think was DB Cooper? If you had to pick somebody, it would be Jason Langseth.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the rub here that I found, just to put a point on it. I'll bring this up on people. I was a bit disappointed when I found this recently, and it was found by myself doing a deep dive in the files here, and I think I know it's a reference to Langseth here. So we'll just point out that one of the things you forgot to mention, I'll just mention this. I'm going to mention a couple things about Langseth before I go into this, is that Langseth, by my estimation, is the most investigated person in the Norjack case. Okay. I have him being investigated in 72, 74, 77, 86, maybe 95, and then in 2003. So 2000s, 90s, 80s. I mean, investigated a lot. I mean, this is a guy who was practicing night jumps, as you said, and then lied to the FBI. They asked him where he was on that date. He said, I was working in Colorado selling industrial chemicals, interestingly enough. And when they asked for verification, he gave them his like workbook for his employers to see that he had made his calls. And when they went and checked those entries, it turns out they were fictional places and fictional names. So he basically lied to them about where he was on the date of the hijacking, which obviously lying to the FBI is a federal crime. So he did that. But when Case Agent Ralph Hope in 99 or 2000 was going through, he did an exhaustive investigation into the case files to see who had not been eliminated yet. And he came across Langseth and Fred Catalano as the only ones who he felt, weren't really removed yet. And now the issue is his photo. I found this for Langseth was shown to at least one of the witnesses. And here it is. They said, it says on September 5th, 72, Nordic eyewitness stated after viewing a photograph of its Langseth that he was not identical to the unsub. So somebody saw a photograph of Langseth. I have FOIA'd for the photograph that was shown of Langseth. When they went to Langseth's wife's house, they said they asked the wife for a photograph, and she gave him one, and that's the photograph of Langseth. That it's not the one that we show a lot is one that I found on Ancestry.com of him, and it's the only photograph I have of him as a younger guy. That's it, though. But he
everybody has destroyed the internet trying to find other photographs of Jason Langseth. I know Pat Boland I would say is probably the authority on Jason Langseth, and I don't know if she's found any other photographs of him. I don't know. I didn't. I tried.
Yeah, like I said, I have a FOIA out right now for a high resolution scan of the photograph that they showed to apparently at least one witness. Who that witness was, though, if it was Robert Gregory or something a year later, I don't know. I don't know who they showed it to. But here's the interesting thing. I'll read this for those this is from one of 302s. I'll read this for those listening to the podcast. This is from the FBI files in 72. A copy of Langseth's weekly reports were obtained from Abco Inc. in Irwin, Pennsylvania, and attempts by agents at Colorado Springs, Colorado to verify Langseth's location on November 24, 71 proved negative in that some of the addresses listed were not valid, and others, although valid, personnel at the various locations could not remember Langseth. So his alibi was a fake alibi, apparently, which is rough to have a fake alibi. But interesting guy. But you
have not argued against him, Brian.
It's hard.
You can't. There's no valid argument against Langseth. There's none.
And that's why the FBI investigated him in 4 different decades, I suppose. So I guess his DNA came back negative. Okay, but again, the DNA that they tested these people against in the early 2000s was partial DNA from the tie, which who knows if that was, if any of those 3 were DB Cooper's DNA. I doubt it. So, but considering how much that tie was passed around, I don't think the DNA that they recovered from the tie was DB Cooper's. So I don't put any stock in suspects being excluded because of the DNA. So
no, neither do I. And the only thing I would say is his age. Well, it was 38.
38, which, I mean,
Alice Hancock said 38-ish.
What's that? Yeah, I mean, it depends on. Depends on what kind of lifestyle he had, and also here's an attack on him. I mean, I wouldn't consider this guy, homely, right? I mean, he's not. I wouldn't say he's like, Clark Gable or something, but he's not ugly, which Cooper apparently was not an attractive individual at all. So there's that. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much.
Have we lost Ryan? You dropped out a bit there.
Am I back?
Do you know what happened? Clark Gable's ghost messed up the connection there. You're back. Yeah, it was Clark Gable's ghost. Whenever you mentioned his name, he came in and haunted the live stream.
Okay. Well, I was just saying that.
So you dropped out for about 10 seconds.
I was just saying this guy doesn't appear homely to me at all. I wouldn't call him ugly.
But then that is a photograph, I believe, from 1950.
Yeah. So
I mean, people can turn awful ugly in 21 years.
And that's also before he was in the Korean War. Maybe he aged a lot. Maybe wartime ages people a lot. It's funny. I actually came across a photo here. I'll show this to everybody. This guy here is a baseball player. This man here literally is 23 years old in this photograph. That is a baseball player from the 70s. Yeah. That man's 23 years old in that picture.
Yeah. But that has been colorized incorrectly. The guy had blonde hair and blonde hair.
Yeah.
It's just that was a black and white photograph that some dude colorized and made a mess of it.
It's in the 70s. This guy played in the 70s and 80s, but this is a 23-year-old. But so people can look crazy, but maybe war ages people there. Maybe, but Langseth is as good a suspect as there is, I would say, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay, so
probably number one-ish.
Yeah, we're moving on. Okay. It is my turn to defend. Okay. Sheridan Peterson. Okay. Well, I would say that Sheridan, yes. How about that? JP Viewer got it. Yeah. Ron Korkovis was the guy's name. Yep. The baseball player's name. Great. Okay. Sheridan Peterson, a beloved suspect in the Vortex, was tall. He was the right age. I believe he was right around 50 at the time. He was a Marine veteran of the Pacific Theater in World War II, which reminds me of something that my grandfather said when my grandfather came back from the Pacific. I remember my grandpa told me when I was younger, he said, that when he came back, he was in his 20s. When he got back from World War II fighting the Japanese, he said he knew he would never be afraid of anything else as long as he lived, because what possibly could scare you after that? So perhaps Peterson was a brave individual. He was a master skydiver. He was a smoke jumper. He worked for Boeing. He was a underwriter for manuals of the 727. So he was a copywriter. So he actually wrote manuals. Basically, these were guys who were writers. They weren't engineers or anything, but they would basically make technical things. They were technical underwriters, they're called. They would make technical things sound not so technical, I guess. So he did that for a job. So he would have known he was maybe like the president or something of the Boeing 727, of the Boeing Skydivers Club. He was the president or something of it in the early 60s. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Peterson's hard to defend. To be honest, go ahead. Have fun.
Sheridan Peterson, and if you don't mind, for those watching, can I have the visual aid, please, of his passport picture? Thank you. You preempted that. The guy looks absolutely nothing like the description. What we have here is a
1970 passport.
His 1970 passport when he was in Nepal. He had an alibi that he gave that checked out. The guy was lily white with piercing blue eyes. Mark Meltzer are the kind of like I know like Bruce is like the mayor of Cooperville. Mark Meltzer to me would be like the governor of Cooperville. And Mark Meltzer and Sheridan Peterson used to go for lunch dates. And he had these striking blue eyes that there is no doubt that, whenever you're on the 727 at the DB Cooper conference, plug for tickets. Just look like, the jump seat behind seat 18C, the aisle seat. You're talking about 3 or 4 feet. I mean, Flo looked this man right in the eye when the note was passed over and said that his eyes were brown. But I mean, the guy had dark eyes. Sheridan Peterson had very, very uncharacteristically bright eyes and pale skin. And the skydiving community back then in the the 60s and the 70s was a very, very small fraternal group. There were some women in it back then, but I mean, it's a very, very small group. Sheridan Peterson, by the time of Norjack, was at instructor level, I believe. He had been smoke jumping and recreationally skydiving for many, many years. In 1971, if Sheridan Peterson was in the country and somebody in the skydiving community was able to point him out, they absolutely would have. He was very well known. Yeah, it's just I think he had the same personality in some respect of Bob Rackstraw. He liked the idea of people thinking he was DB Cooper, and he played on it. And he actually was quite well known. He was I don't believe he was an evil, nasty-hearted kind of guy. He was a big defender of civil rights.
Yes, his only arrest of his life apparently came in Mississippi during the Freedom Summer of '62. He participated in a sit-in at a segregated cafe or something and was arrested for civil rights and spent his time in Vietnam working with victims of the war. Just a decent individual. In the 20, I guess it's the, I think it's the 2018. Yes, the 2018 Eric Eulis History's Mysteries. We have Peterson being interviewed by Mary Jean Fryer, and he earnestly says, well, DB Cooper was a bad guy. I'm a good guy. And I believe him. I
believe him too. I mean, DB Cooper has to look like what Bill, Tina, Flo, Alice, Hal Williams, this guy has to look like what they said he looked like. This man on the screen, this very uncharacteristically pale and bright-eyed man, was not the man the witnesses saw. We can't keep gaslighting them, people. Cooper was a swarthy, dark-eyed man in his 40s or 50s. I mean, Sheridan Peterson at that time was not that. And Sheridan Peterson was completely bald, and was a non-smoker.
Yeah,
in fact, I would go as far as to say I believe he hated smoking and was anti-smoking. He was very health conscious. Yeah. He lived to nearly 100 years old. He only died a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So he lived.
He was old. He was in his 90s for sure.
Yeah, like, I mean,
yeah, good point. How many smokers have that kind of longevity? Yeah.
No! And I mean, and this was a guy that, Sheridan Peterson was not DB Cooper. He's a lovely guy. He liked to think he was DB Cooper himself.
He's fun with it, yeah.
Yeah, there's two people who seriously thought, like, I mean, other than the FBI, that Sheridan Peterson was DB Cooper. One was Eric Eulis, and the other one was Sheridan Peterson.
Yeah, and it's true. Yeah, but and honestly, it was. Peterson's just a bad suspect. It was. Yeah, it's just he's not not a good suspect. Okay, all right. So
his book's weird. I don't know what it's called, but he wrote a book. It was weird. I read it, and it sort of upset me a bit. I didn't know what to think of it, but it's out there.
The Idiot's Frightful Laughter. Yeah,
that one.
It's odd. Okay. Rose Ellis, by the way, is in the chat. Rose said, did they find the SIGs? No, the SIGs were destroyed, Rose. In December of '71, they threw them in the trash. Yep. Literally threw them in the trash can. Quite literally.
The rats are gone forever.
Yes. Okay. Your turn to defend. Kenny Christensen. Yeah. Not a good one.
That's okay. And I've used the flip already. Okay. Yeah. Kenny Christensen. He was male. He was around the right age. I mean, Bill Radachak, his famous line, "Oh, this man knows his way around an airplane." Kenny Christensen knew his way around an airplane. He was a purser with Northwest Orient, a management position. God, there's so much that you have to leave out to try and make a case for Kenny Christensen. He had money after 1971 and bought a house, and it's not because Kenny was a gay guy that had no children or any financial commitments and was able to save his money in a well-paid job. It was because he robbed this plane. That's why he robbed this plane. That's what he did. He lived frugally and saved a lot of money. No, it's because he hijacked this plane. And whenever he went to lower the aft stairs, I mean, with Cooper, we do know that he became irate at one stage because he couldn't get the stairs down per Bill Radachak. So that was a bluff by Kenny because he was great like that. I mean, well, I was going to try and go down the angle of he hid his sexuality. That's not true. Blevins was very good at correcting people on that. Everybody close to Kenny knew that he was a gay guy, and he was. But yeah, that was a bluff on the plane. Even though the main part of his job was lowering these aft stairs on the evening of Norjack, that was the main thing he had to do, and it was very simple. It was just a simple pull lever, and he had to bluff that he couldn't pull a pull lever.
You're defending Kenny.
I know, I am, but it was a bluff.
Oh, I see. I get it. Yeah, I got lost there.
It was a bluff. It was playing mind games. You see. Well, what I just did there is what Kenny did.
Oh, he threw them off.
Yeah, he threw them off, and what he did, right? What Kenny could do, a skill that he did have, he could drive a car, and he drove that car to Tina Bar and buried the money there. That's what he did. Kenny did it with his bare hands. He had a lot of free time. You see, he had no kids. And so he had lots of free time to go and bury money and like bury a parachute and stuff. Come on, what else? He nearly confessed it on his deathbed, but unfortunately he went to the great beyond before he could get out that he was DB Cooper. But he absolutely was going to say it. He was going to confess to the crime. Apparently the second best-selling book about DB Cooper of all time is focused on Kenny Christensen. You may have heard that once or twice from Blevins.
Yeah. I've never heard that on Reddit every day. No, I haven't.
Yeah. So it must be true. I mean, if that's the second, and Jeff Gray liked him as well. Like he's a smart guy. So Jeff and Blevins can't be wrong. So yes, it was Kenny Christensen.
All right. So well, this is another layup here. People, you're not going to hijack. I mean, the fact is this: Kenny. I think the ultimate death knell for Kenny Christensen that is you cannot get past is the fact that he continued to work for Northwest Airlines for another 20 years. Okay. He very, very easily, and if one of the things I would ask Tina, just for the hell of it, if I ever spoke to her, is, did you know Kenny Christensen? Because we did run into a stewardess for Northwest Orient last year at CooperCon. There's a plug for you. Come to CooperCon. And we did meet a stewardess who was working as an interpreter there or whatever. And she said that it was a joke among them for years that Kenny was Cooper. Like at the time, because Kenny was so demure and so kind of just like a nice guy.
Just a nice guy.
Yeah, they were just joking with him, like, oh yeah. And he played into it. And I think that this, part of me wonders if this photograph of Kenny from 71 or whatever, from Christmas 71, he's bald, by the way, is a gag photo maybe. But again, the problem with that being a gag photo is that where's the sunglasses, right? Cooper famously wore sunglasses. If that was a gag photo saying, oh, look at me, I'm Cooper, he'd be wearing sunglasses. But Kenny worked for Northwest Orient for a long time. As you so eloquently made a joke about, this guy knew how to lower the stairs on the 727. That was his literal job. Cooper had problem with it, but Kenny would not have known. I mean, I guess he maybe could have figured it out somehow, but it's unlikely. Who was on that plane that day? Which stewardesses were there? You know, if Flo knew Kenny, who for all we knew, Flo and Tina and Alice knew Kenny Christensen at the time. Even we don't know that, but they may have.
Company. It's you wouldn't bet against it. That between 5 people, right? You are the flight crew who heard his voice. I mean, Kenny had to fucking speak on the interphone and you do passenger announcements. Where surely in the cockpit somebody would have said, "Oh, I know that voice. There's not very many male pursers in this small airline in the United States. That's Kenny Christian's voice," because they spoke to him.
Right. And even more damning is the fact that Tina Mucklow she retired from Northwest Orient in like 78 or 79. She had spent the previous 5-6 years flying to the east, so Far East. So she did their Far East routes, which is what Kenny Christensen did. So she almost certainly worked with Kenny Christensen, I would say.
Certainly.
I mean, probably. A small company, and people knew each other. And why would Kenny even risk that? Go hijack Hughes Air West or Delta or somebody, right? Hijack anybody other than your own thing if this is your idea. Kenny is and the guy was bald. It's just Kenny's been debunked a million times. So okay, moving on.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just stupid.
Not Cooper. Not
okay.
The guy.
I have to defend Fred Catalano. Okay. No, I'm defending Fred Catalano. Okay. So.
No, I defended Kenny. So I have to defend Fred Catalano.
No, I
defended Kenny.
Yeah, and then I attacked Kenny. Now it's my turn to defend. So
crap! Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's late. It's 2 a.m.
Yeah, I know. It's 2 a.m. over there. So, Fred Catalano, as we mentioned with Jason Langseth, is one of the two. There's Fred. Is one of the 2 suspects who the FBI did not eliminate, and that they wanted his DNA, but there's no indication that they ever got it from him or anybody else. He had no kids or anything. Don't believe he may have been married briefly, but so Fred Catalano was a purser for TWA. When the FBI sent out a thing to all airlines saying, "Hey, do you have any disgruntled former employees or current employees who are misfits or bad apples? Because we think this was an inside job in the airline industry. Let us know." Well, this guy was such a problem. He was 38 at the time, maybe 37. He was such a problem that TWA, his own airline, who he was working for at the time, turned him in. And the FBI could never verify. They could never verify that his location he was off the week of the hijacking. They could never verify where he was, and he was actually living in Oregon at the time. He was from New York City, which that might be a way to attack him, but he was from New York, I believe. And but he had actually trained to be a pilot, flying, I believe, 727s actually. That laid us in the FBI files. And he couldn't get a job as a pilot. There was a wait list for pilots back then, basically. And the thing about Catalano is that he had several, more than one, eyewitnesses. Let's see if this is one of them. Say that they liked his photograph. I think this is, yes, this is Robert Gregory says that the photograph of Catalano bore a very strong resemblance to the hijacker. He particularly noted the hairline, stating that if the hair in the photograph was marceled and it was the hijackers, it would be an exceptionally good likeness. He further noted strong similarities in the high cheekbones, the long nose, and eyes as he remembered in the hijacker. So we do have eyewitnesses who did not discount his photograph, which is interesting. So that's Fred Catalano. They could never find his whereabouts. He was a disgruntled airline employee was an Army veteran. So he'd never been in combat or anything, but he was an Army veteran. And just the fact that the FBI never eliminated him, I would say, is really among the strongest defenses for Fred Catalano. Go ahead.
Fred Catalano, there's a lot going against the guy. I mean, if he's a New Yorker and has a stereotypical, New York accent like that, walking here, he's, if he has that kind of the fiery Italian personality, which I think a lot of his TWA colleagues didn't really like about him. Again, he stood out so much like a sore thumb that his own colleagues decided to put him forward, which I think wasn't for the fact that they thought he was DB Cooper. It's because they thought, hey, this guy's an asshole, let's stitch him up. And for no other reason than that. I mean, yeah, he could fly a 727. I mean, he had a commercial pilot's license, but again, that what goes against him is the lowering of the stairs, which was a very, very basic action. And that, I mean, even with the physical descriptors, he doesn't really look like him. He has a very distinctive face and a distinctive hairline. I mean, Brad has said in the comments about it. His eyes are small and sunken, and those, I believe, though that kind of eye shape, very, very distinctive and would have been picked up. Just because nobody knew where he was at the time of the hijacking doesn't mean that he actually did it. The fact he was living in Oregon is a big mark against, because most of the copycats traveled 400 or 500 miles plus to actually carry out the crime. He lives too close. I mean, he was a purser. He could no way go into any airport in the Pacific Northwest and nobody recognized him. Even when he was buying his ticket, what was the line right next to the Northwest Orient line was TWA, and then Delta was on the other side. So let's look at all the people Fred Catalano had to walk past that could have recognized him. So some light airport security, the airport cops, the desk agents who not only were strictly speaking with the one airline, some worked for other ones as well on a part-time basis, the gate agents, the flight crews, other stews and pilots walking through the airport. I mean, it would be exceptional for that guy, being a purser for Northwest Orient, to walk through any airport and not be recognized, or for nobody to recognize his voice. If he was DB Cooper, somebody would have seen him. So especially in PDX, which I don't know if PDX was his home airport.
No,
but it was
LA was where they were based out of.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know why he was living in Oregon at the time, but he was. I wish I could. I think that in fact, let me find that out. Rose is asking about him living in Oregon. Yeah, I think that, let me find if the files have, Catalano was living, it says, although Catalano is officially, this is FBI talking, although Catalano is officially based at Los Angeles, he is currently residing at 1074 Barstow Avenue, Eugene, Oregon. Says that Catalano is considered a, quote, rebel by airline supervisors and will not follow airline rules and regulations. He has been suspended many times for breaking these rules and regulations. TWA was advised that Catalano owed money on his California state and federal income taxes. He was frequently short on his cash. He was frequently short on his cash accounts for liquor and headsets on the plane and failed to hand in proper reports. There were other discrepancies. It says that he is on blah, 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 blah. Yeah, he's from Brooklyn, New York. So I agree with it. That's a problem for him for sure. Is that, that I would think that especially an East Coaster, well, I mean, someone like Tina from Philly is going to know a New York accent when she hears it for sure. So, yeah. Anyway, okay. So there's Fred Catalano. Moving on. Your turn to defend. Okay, good one. LD Cooper.
Well, I think that LD Cooper is a better suspect than a lot of people give him credit for. I think with Marla's very strong advocacy of LD, if anything, may have actually harmed his case, because he is a very, very good um, as um, as a suspect. When Tina and or Flo, either or one of them maybe, was shown his photograph, said that that was the closest likeness of the
Whoa.
hijacker. It was Flo said that LD Cooper was the closest resemblance to the hijacker, and that's very, very telling for him. Um, he he had a lot of struggles. This guy. I mean, what a lot of people think about DB Cooper is that this was this cool, calm, collected, logical guy, and DB Cooper just wasn't, because logical people don't get out of bed and show people a bomb or a fake bomb in order to get money and a parachute and escape with one. Um, LD Cooper had a lot of emotional struggles, PTSD. He lost his wife to suicide. I
Earlier,
believe
earlier that year.
several months before the hijacking. So he was destitute. He was desperate for money. He had addiction issues. He is someone that, in a fragile mental state, who was reported to be not. I'm not going to go as far as to say suicidal, but I think with Cooper, a lot of us can agree that DB Cooper did not care if he lived or died. And with LD Cooper, with his history of erratic behavior, we could argue that that fits the psychological profile of the actual hijacker, and looked like him. And again, maybe not to the level of Jason Langseth, but if LD Cooper did transpire to be DB Cooper, I would not be surprised. Now, a lot of people would use, oh, why would he use his real name for committing crimes? The serial killer, Ted Bundy, did introduce himself to his victims as Ted, one who famously he kicked him in the balls and ran, had told the police the description, and that he told her that his name was Ted. And Ted Bundy drove his own car. So it is not ridiculous that DB Cooper's last name was actually Cooper. It's not outside the realms of possibility. There's a very shady story about him and his brother Dewey, who worked for Boeing, on the night of the hijacking, coming back covered in mud or with an injury, and so on. So I mean, as far as LD Cooper being DB Cooper, it's certainly not ridiculous by any stretch of the imagination. And I think, as far as the psychological profile of Cooper, I think this guy's the closest. Very interesting.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I would say that for LD, just the issue, as you pointed out, I mean, you may have not mentioned it, but it is important to mention that he was, maybe you mentioned it, but as of October of 71, he was in the VA mental hospital in Portland. So he was literally in the I mean, not to be ugly about it, he was in the nut house, I guess. Sadly, for PTSD or whatever it was. He was in the Korean War. I would attack him, though, by saying he just has no aviation experience. There's no indication he had ever skydived. There's no indication he had ever had any aviation experience at all to be able to argue. I mean, again, DB Cooper, whoever he was, correctly called the bluff of the pilots when they were stalling and were waiting for their IFR clearance and to file their flight plan. Cooper said, "Bullshit. You can file that IFR clearance in the air. Let's go. Let's get the show on the road." That was the last thing he said before "let's get the show on the road." He said, "You can pick it up in the air. Let's get the show on the road." To their IFR clearance. So, and they were like, "Well, shit, he got us." Cooper didn't call their bluff on some things, but he called their bluff on that because he knew that was wrong. That that there was no reason to wait on the ground for an IFR clearance.
Or refueling. This doesn't take this long. He knew that to refuel the bird was 25 minutes.
Yeah, so I don't think LD would do that.
No.
I would. I mean, really, I guess the main thing, that's really that, and honestly, that is the only real problem with LD, as far as I can tell. He's like I said, as you said, it's a bit of the Joe Weber thing that Marla, in a way, is LD's own worst advocate.
Yes.
Right. And she harms him as a suspect. But
because he's not bad. He's not bad. If you this is who Cooper will turn out to be. This is what my money's on. Whether the guy loved or not or whatever, who cares, right? But if you've got Langset's skill set and LD's psychological profile, that's the hijacker.
Yeah, I mean, the hijackers, the copycats, here's the thing. The copycats, their psych profiles are very, other than Mac, these were guys who were suffering present, and Heinemann, I guess. Most of these guys were suffering very present PTSD, okay? Like, as in like, I'm really struggling right now. And LD Cooper had just got out of the mental hospital a month earlier.
Wife suicide will do that to you.
Right. Yeah, wife suicide will do that to you. He was a bit of a loser. And, that's another thing, too. And that's a problem with guys like Verdal or any of these guys who had careers. Hijackers are losers. They're losers. And I don't mean to say that, it's Mac. Look, I get, like, Mac is a great friend of mine. Martin McNally, I guarantee you, would say, yes, when I was 27 years old, I was a loser. I was an unemployed gas station attendant, right? Who was a felon already at that age, right? These guys were, but LD, another thing too, though, another knock on LD, though, I would say, the way to attack him is that LD seemed to be an alcoholic. My belief is that what Marla saw that day, when Marla was 7 or 8 years old, what Marla saw was the result of a drunk driving accident. LD was a felon, okay, he had felony DUI, okay, which now, to get a felony for a DUI, unless you kill somebody, generally the only way you get a felony DUI is if it's your third DUI, they'll slap a felony on you. So we know that LD Cooper by 1962, okay, was a felon for DUI. So he had 3 DUIs. Now, and remember, this is an era where there are no roadblocks checking for DUIs. There's no breathalyzers. There's no, back then, if they pulled you over and you were drunk, it was like, okay, we'll follow you home. That sort of thing in America. So to get DUIs back then was hard. Okay. So LD had these, and I think LD, I can see him drinking too much eggnog or something and flipping his Mustang down the road. And, Marla remembers brother Dewey pulling up with LD in the passenger seat covered in blood. I suspect that perhaps LD was in a car wreck and, crashed his car or something. And that's what Marla was seeing. But to a 7-year-old, she's not going to know what she's looking at, right?
No.
Except her uncle's bloody. And that's that. Yeah. So
there's a question there I think is a good question from JP Viewer.
Yeah.
So you think Cooper had legit mental issues? Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Hell yes. No one, listen, I mean, JP, go into my archive and I forget what my podcast is called, but I think it's like, I forget one of my episodes is very short. It's a 10-minute podcast I did about Cooper's mental state. None of us, hopefully, listening to this was going to wake up tomorrow and go, you know what? I'm literally going to walk onto a plane and threaten to murder everybody unless you give me $1 million. Like, your life is over. Your life is over if you fail, either by being killed by law enforcement or sitting in a prison cell for the rest of your life. This is not a stable person. I don't care how well he behaved. It doesn't matter. I mean, Ted Bundy was well behaved up until he wasn't, right? Yeah. I mean, psychopaths, sociopaths can behave oftentimes, right? Yes. Well, Rose says your podcasts are 2 or 3 hours long, except that one. That's my shortest one. I did have one that was 10 minutes long about that. So no. Yes, Cooper had mental issues. Yeah. Okay.
He was a troubled man.
Yeah.
He was a troubled man.
okay, I am defending Lee Seller. Okay. Okay, I know dead camp guy there, Jude. So you have to attack a dead camp guy here in a second. But Lee Seller, okay. So Lee was brought to me. Lee is the guy I was mentioning earlier who was his nephew took him to Eric, contacted Eric first. And Eric basically said, see if you can connection to the tie particles. I don't think so. Okay, bye. Don't talk to me again. And then he came to me, thankfully. And I was like, oh, wait a second. Your uncle. So LD Cooper, not LD. So Lee Seller, let me pull up a photo of Lee. Here's Lee in World War II. Okay, so Lee was a Canadian who was a pilot. He flew bombers in World War II. He was discharged during World War II for, quote, I forget what it was called, a sinus infection or something, which normally that was a polite, back then, it was a polite way, perhaps, of saying discharged for PTSD or something like that. They didn't really discharge people for PTSD back then. They came up with some other excuse to discharge a otherwise honorable service member. And he flew bombing missions over Europe in World War II, came back to America. Let me just point out, he was Canadian, Western Canadian. He was from, I believe, either Vancouver or Edmonton. Okay. And basically never amounted to anything. He tried. He was a guy who was described as thinking he was smarter than he really was. Who had delusions of grandeur a little bit. He tried to open up a Western magazine, like a Western magazine at some point. He lived in he lived in Vancouver, Washington in the early 60s, then moved, and that's been verified by me. He then moved up to the Seattle area, and I believe it was in early 1971. He had his first wife, who he had his kids with, died of cancer, I believe. And then he had another wife who divorced him, and he was on his third wife at this point. Okay, which not many people back then were on their third wives. So obviously, he had some problems, but he was very poor with money. His daughter said that one time he was supposed to go buy her a winter coat, and he came back with a new set of golf clubs instead. So not a smart guy like that. Didn't care about money, or wasn't good with money. And he owed money to bookies a lot, apparently. He had these weird connections to, he was very, apparently around 70 and 71, he began opening up fake bank accounts using the names of relatives. Okay. He had loan sharks or somebody around him. His daughter said that one day there was a knock on the door, and Dad, Lee Seller, ran out the back door, and they didn't see him again for 3 months. He just disappeared. Then finally in early 71, he takes his teenagers and drops them off, I believe, in Seattle. I forget the name of the town outside Seattle, but it's where his parents lived. He dropped his 2 kids off early 71 and vanished. He's never been seen again. So this guy disappears in early 71 from the Seattle area and was never seen again. He was 5'11". Okay. He had brown eyes. He had some dark skin, and knew aviation, had some mental illness problems from the war. And obviously his head shape, he has kind of the angular long head that you want from Cooper. His nose looks a little pointed, like you'd like for Cooper. And, but for those who think Cooper died or was successful and absconded the country, or made a new life for himself, Lee Seller is a new suspect who I like a good deal. Jude?
Yeah, this guy's very, very hard to argue against. In a lot of ways, there's some very fragile arguments against him in that he lived too close to PDX Seattle. If he was going to conduct and carry out this crime, he would go much, much further away. He just seemed a bit too close. He lived in Seattle, had family in Seattle, seemingly had debtors and creditors in Seattle who were after him. This guy had taken out bank loans and got cars and wrote bad checks. I mean, very on brand for Cooper. I mean, but the thing is, though, is that there's nothing really tying him to the crime. I mean, I am going to jump on the tie particles thing because I really have nothing else, and I feel so hollow, and I feel so bad being so disingenuous and kind of trying to argue a point I don't really believe. But his family do not believe that he was DB Cooper. A lot of members of his family, or at least some, do not believe that he was DB Cooper.
His two children don't.
Do not believe that he was DB Cooper. I will say for the record, I believe them, because a lot of people who genuinely believe their loved one to be DB Cooper are very quick to say, I believe it was him. Another one against is that he had really bad eyesight and wore very large horn-rimmed glasses. His eyesight was terrible, and even wearing prescription sunglasses in a hijacking is not a good idea if you have eyesight as bad as this guy, who had small, angled, squinty eyes, which I think Flo would have picked up as well. He has, yes, the lower lip and the narrow face and the thin nose, but his eyes are unusually small, and would be very, very defining of him. He's not a blendy McNobody. He is quite distinctive in his physical appearance. And of course, he's never been investigated by the FBI or anything. But I mean, he is quite, distinctive, in his face.
His eyes look a bit Asian. He looks like he has the Mongolian folds, they call it, the whatever those are called, on his eyes. I forget what that's called. The epilineal folds or something. And they also call the Mongolian folds. His eyes do look a little Asian there.
He had problems with his eyes and his eyesight, and
his eyesight wasn't bad enough to be it must have gotten worse over age, because his nephew did say that he didn't always wear glasses though, and that he obviously was a pilot in the war, so pilots have to have good eyesight. You couldn't be a pilot without good eyesight. So
yeah, but this was when the guy was 21. I mean, and on Norjack, I think the guy was 50. And I mean, one thing, and I can promise you this: there's one thing that you really need other than a parachute when you go for a skydive, and it's good eyesight. And a skydive at night with a guy with crappy eyesight, it's just asking for death. I mean, is it outside the realms of possibility that somebody with failing eyesight would put themselves in such a dangerous, silly position? Yeah, absolutely. Why not? But I mean, it's a decent circumstantial case. I mean, as far as circumstantial evidence, like Cooper, after Norjack, didn't exist. Neither did this guy. No. The thing is, Cooper didn't exist after the hijack. Neither of these people existed afterward. I suppose that's a sort of defense case, but at the same time, he's very hard to have an argument against.
Yeah, he scores pretty high on my list, actually. I mean, because he had reasons.
He doesn't have a fatal flaw. Fatal flaw.
Yeah, I wouldn't say fatal. Nothing fatal. Yeah, he just nothing. There's nothing. Just nothing to connect him. Okay. All right. Moving on. All right. So, all right. You defend. Oh, lucky you. You wanted this one. Dr. James Roman.
Dr. James Roman was a horrible piece of shit. He murdered his family, I believe. Did he murder his wife
and her lover?
He murdered his wife and her lover. So Dr. James Roman, again, we'll go to the physical characteristics: balding hair, brown eyes, olive skin, lower lip, dark eyes. After his death, I mean, he murdered his wife and her lover and then turned the gun on himself. And whenever the FBI searched his barn, he had like dynamite and wires and batteries and stuff, which is like, whoa. And this was maybe a week or two. There's not much difference between Tina
it was,
Bar.
Yeah, Tina Bar was on a Sunday. This was earlier that week.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, and by the way, I believe Dr. Roman lived not too far from Tina Bar.
He lived in Vancouver, yeah.
Like, he lived relatively near where the money was found.
No, actually, no. He lived actually in the town of Washougal, Washington. So, yeah. So
he's not far from there. The guy actually had aviation experience and flew for freaking NASA. So a bit of a rock star. He absolutely used a parachute. I mean, with the NASA training, I mean, it's been checked out. The guy used a parachute. That's we can't argue.
Yeah, of course.
There's no. I mean, you like, could you imagine like Buzz Aldrin being like, "Hey, I'm in space and I never used a parachute before."
No. And he was a jet test pilot. Okay. Yeah. Yes. He
knew his way around an airplane. So he knew his way around an airplane. He used explosives. He was not above murder. Cooper, we don't really know the depth of Cooper's evil, because if Cooper said, "I want $200,000 and 4 parachutes," and Mr. Nyrop said, "Go fuck yourself," we don't know the depth of what this guy could do. For all we know, in a parallel universe, Cooper could have pulled a revolver out of his trench coat and started executing people. We don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't. We don't know. I mean, the positive decisions made by the flight crew and stuff, we didn't see the depth of Cooper's evil that night. But with James Roman, a deeply troubled, sinister murderer with aviation experience, who looked like the guy, was the right age. I mean, as far as being the guy, again, very hard to argue against. He was actually investigated by the FBI. But I will pass over to Ryan to see what ruled the guy out.
Well, I guess the main argument against Roman is that he was known in Vancouver. So you forgot a couple things about him. He's half Belgian as well.
Oh, yes. The Dan Cooper comic.
Yeah, the Dan Cooper connection there. He was born in Paris to a Belgian mother and an American father, and then moved over here when he was younger. So he was bilingual. And he joined. He was a test pilot for the Air Force, and then joined NASA. He was in the same NASA astronaut group as Michael Collins, which is cool, and actually passed astronaut training. And instead of becoming an astronaut, they said, "Hey, we would rather you," because he had a medical license at the time. They said, "We'd rather you be like a flight surgeon sort of thing." And he said, "Okay, I can do that." So his main thing in the early 60s was focused on the effects of space flight on the human heart. Okay. Then he gets out of NASA for some reason and goes and becomes a surgeon, but he spent his residency in Vancouver. Okay. So he was in Portland. So he was at the Portland hospital. So that's an attack on him, is that he had just become a doctor earlier in 71, I think. So he had been there from 68 to 71 in Portland. So very good chance that somebody on that plane might have recognized him, right? That's one of the doctors at the Portland hospital, right? But maybe not. But I mean, as you mentioned, when they went to this guy's house after his double murder suicide, they found explosives hidden, police scanners, fake IDs. He had created fake credentials. He may have even been a fake doctor. Who the hell knows? I mean,
I forgot that stuff, but he was a fraudster.
He was a fraudster. Yeah, the FBI uncovered that he had been sued. He was doing a kidney operation on a woman and cut off her left breast somehow. How do you do that? I mean, insane. And again, the weirdness of him doing this, him being a Cooper suspect and then offing himself a week before the money is found at Tina Bar, is strange, to say the least.
It's a human intervention explanation. It's pie in the sky, but there's a point I wanted to latch on to. And
Yeah.
I love saying this anytime I can. You know, the idea Cooper's empathetic and a nice guy because he ordered people dinner. A lot of serial killers either bought their victims drinks or offered to give them a ride home. Were they empathetic? No.
No, it's just
Cooper
a
was
means to an
either
end.
it was a means to an end. I mean, with
Sure.
Cooper, it's the same thing.
What's
The
the same
idea of,
reason?
oh, this lovely guy got meals. No,
Well, I mean,
that
look,
doesn't make him a nice guy.
think about this. He also offered the crew drugs to stay awake.
Yeah.
Is that like, hey, I'm a nice guy, I'm going to offer you drugs to stay awake? No, it's I need you functioning so I can commit my crime. It's a means to an end, right? So no, Roman though, but Roman, yeah, Roman's good, but yeah,
He's
anyway,
he's very good. He's not talked about enough. I don't
no,
think. I think this guy was. I mean, Cooper was a bad guy. Roman was a bad guy. He had all the skills, looked like
yeah,
him. I think I certainly would, if I were in the FBI, if I had decision-making power over this case, I would be getting the sentence of Roman if he has any. I don't think they had any children.
no, he had a step kid who was in the house. He had a 13-year-old stepson who was in the house when he killed when he killed her mom and then killed himself.
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things where with Roman, somebody in the group did an ancestry on Dr. Roman, and I don't think there's even anybody DNA could be taken from. He was also cremated.
No, yeah, exactly. So Roman's Roman. All right, moving on. All right, let's see. We're trying to keep us under 3 hours here. Let's see. I have to defend. Okay, Don Burnworth. Okay, Don Burnworth was a suspect, and he is. I'll pull up his thing. I always like to do him. Don Burnworth looks so much like the damn Bing sketch. It is shocking. I mean, that's remarkable, really, right? Mm-hmm. That is truly remarkable. Now, Don Burnworth was a 727 pilot for, I want to say American Airlines, I think. And he was furloughed at the time, which means they had no work for him. And he was involved in a nasty custody case with his wife, who was a mob wife. His wife had some connection to the mob, and he had absconded with his 3 children to Germany at the time. So that was his alibi, was I was in Germany at the time. Now, I would say that, and that's what they ruled him out on. He was in Germany. But I would say that if you're an airline pilot who is furloughed, doesn't mean you lose your credentials. This guy could easily, what a great excuse, right? I mean, get on a plane, go do this skyjacking in America and work your way back to Germany. Well, I was in Germany the whole time, right? I mean, there's a guy who probably knew how to get through customs without being noticed, knew how to deadhead on airplanes without any record of him being on these airplanes. Deadheading is when pilots will fly for free on other planes as part of the company. But that was his excuse. He looks rather swarthy. I mean, look at this guy. Similarly to Skip Hall, this is somebody who you could see somebody saying looks Latino, right? Or looks quasi-Native American, right? So that's Don Burnworth. Really not a lot to say about him other than that he was a very skilled pilot. I believe he actually had a patent on something to do with the 727. Okay, so he definitely knew the 727. He was a great pilot. I believe Mark Meltzer spoke to him actually when he was doing some research and thought he was a nice guy. But that's Don Burnworth. Not a lot of information out there about him, but other than he was a 727 pilot for American Airlines. He was turned in because, my God, why wouldn't you turn this guy in? He looks just like the damn sketch. And he was 43 at the time. So he's good age. But that's Don Burnworth. Good.
I think it's an easy defense. He's too well known. He was too well known in aviation circles. The chances of Harold Anderson, Radachak, and
no. There were thousands of pilots. Thousands of pilots in the world. He was a different airline. I don't think so. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't think they would have known his voice or anything.
Like, even and what I will say is, and I'll actually agree with. There was a comment there. And I think there might be a little bit of Jesus and toast. Personally, I don't think he looks an awful lot like the sketch.
What in the hell are you looking at?
I just don't. I don't see it.
What are you
I'm sorry.
about?
I don't see it. I don't. Don Burnworth has a very pronounced crooked nose and a small mouth. I mean, I just other than that, and like I don't.
The head shape, my God, the hairline, it's flawless.
I don't.
His ears don't protrude. You know, okay, whatever. I mean, I guess. I mean, maybe I'm just seeing what I want to see because here Mary Johns is saying that he looks less unlike the Bing sketch than most suspects. I don't even. Man,
Well, I suppose you're right. I mean, a sketch is a sketch. It's a photograph. It's a drawing. It's a cartoon. It's an old Wild West cartoon wanted poster. That's what the DB Cooper sketches are. But with Don Burnworth, there's nothing really else. I mean, really, the only thing that people think that makes him DB Cooper is that the guy could fly a plane. I mean, it's a very flimsy case for him, which makes it even harder to defend against. I mean, the case against him is pretty much zilch, other than he could fly a plane and he kidnapped his kids once.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, fair enough. All right. Moving on. I mean, yeah, Burnworth, there's not a lot on Burnworth. Okay.
There's not a lot of information about him.
No.
I don't think he's that interesting.
Okay.
Probably a nice guy, but.
So your turn. You have to defend Dick Lepsey. Okay. Good luck.
Okay, so Dick Lepsey went missing in 1969. He disappeared. He wore a black tie. There's a skinny black tie. Now that is the same Cooper clip-on tie, but it's a ruse. The actual ties on it are a ruse for that photograph. So he's wearing a black jacket. Cooper wore a black jacket. We know he owned a black jacket. We know he smoked. His car was found near an airport, and it had a packet of smokes in it. So we know that he was a smoker. We know that he wore a black tie. He had more than one black tie. There's another one. He had a black jacket.
Turkey neck.
He had the turkey neck. Yeah. And he's completely missing. He may or may not have owed people money. He may or may not have been suicidal. That's it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Lepsey. I mean, for a guy who has a book written, I'll say this: for a suspect who has a book written about him, he is pretty weak. I mean, there's no aviation. He and Verdal actually are the only two, as far as I know, are the only two Cooper suspects who were never in the military. Now, that's not a knock on Verdal, because Verdal was exempted for the Manhattan Project. Verdal killed more people than 1,000 Audie Murphys could have. So Verdal certainly served this country. But Lepsey, I mean, there's just nothing to connect him at all. If he went missing in 71, he would have a better case, but he went missing in 68.
69.
Yeah, I think it's 69. Yeah. And I just don't, I mean, yeah.
Are there any Lepsey people? Like, you know the way like Lisa's a Braden person, and there's Verdal people, and there's no Dick Lepsey people.
Yeah,
like,
I don't
Dick
know.
Lepsey just have a champion.
Yeah, I don't know of any. Mary's asking about him having a scar. I guess you're talking about Lepsey. Is this a fold in the pic? Let me see. Yeah, that's going to be a fold in the picture, Mary. That's not a. Yeah, there's no scars on him.
There's a scar on his face.
But no, Lepsey's just. I mean, a sad case. I mean, the guy had 4 kids and emptied his bank account and then disappeared and left his car in the airport there. I want to say, damn, where was he from? I want to say Milwaukee or somewhere in Wisconsin, maybe, or
Michigan.
Michigan. Yeah, Michigan. Thank you, Jude. Michigan. Yeah. Just not there. He's just, yeah. Okay. Next. I have to defend. Okay. Wait, am I defending? Yeah, I'm defending a much closer missing person. The Melvin Wilson. Okay. All right. So Melvin Wilson, I think the best thing about Melvin Wilson to say is that Melvin Wilson was 43 at the time. Melvin Wilson was 6 feet tall. They said he had a winter tan. Everybody used to say he had a winter tan because his skin complexion was dark. And now this photograph this is FBI. This is actually not FBI. It's a law enforcement surveillance photo from 71 of him. But he had a winter tan, which means his skin was always dark. And he had his eyes were listed as blue, but his daughter asked his daughter, Vicki Wilson, is a prominent participant in the Vortex, asked her mother what color eyes Dad had. And she said his eyes were so blue, they looked black. So they're very dark eyes, very dark, so dark blue that they look black. But I think the most astonishing thing is that this guy went missing in August of 71 because he had just been indicted for counterfeiting $200,000. All right. So he had counterfeited $200,000 and thrown it when he got caught, he threw it all he put it in a 55-gallon drum and dumped it into the Mississippi River up near Wisconsin, and then vanished, never seen again. And so we have a guy who's desperate. He's on the run. He's the right age. He had kids. He was on the run for counterfeiting $200,000 on the nose there, and was never seen again. Although he did live past, we do know that he lived past the date because he did father a kid out of wedlock. Not out of wedlock. Well, I guess it would have been out of wedlock because he wasn't divorced, but he did have a child. He showed up though. He showed up in Canada in January of 72, telling people that he was a furloughed airline pilot named Ken Mazur, and knocked up a 20-year-old girl and then got her pregnant and then skipped town and was never seen again after that. So that is Melvin Wilson. Yeah.
Again, Melvin Wilson doesn't have a fatal flaw either as a suspect. I don't believe. I think he has the motive. As far as aviation experience,
none.
Yeah,
he was in the Melvin was in the surface Navy in World War II. He was on a destroyer, I think.
But as far as aviation experience, which I think there needs to be somewhere. I think other than that, he doesn't really have a fatal flaw. The counterfeiting the $200,000, that's very, very on the nose. It's very hard to come up with a counter argument for it. But then again, it's too obvious. But then that's a really weak counter argument. But Melvin Wilson as another one, and I know it's a bit of a cop-out kind of argument against, but certainly needs, I think, more attention should be focused on him.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, look, who knows? But he seems like a guy who would have been like on the run, sitting in a hotel and sees Paul Sini and goes, "Oh, I could do that," or "I could try that." This was a con man. He was a confidence man. Literally, his whole career. I asked Vicki, his daughter, "What did your dad do for a career?" She goes, "Crime." That was his job, was being a criminal.
He was a career criminal.
Career criminal, yep. And was a good one, apparently, up until he got indicted. Because he had no prisons. He did not serve in prison. He was not a felon. But he had a life in crime until he got indicted for the counterfeiting. So there's that.
But there's nothing really. There's no, other than no aviation experience. He looks like it. He's around the right age. There's definitely a motive. He was never caught for any crimes. He could keep his mouth shut. It's hard to argue against.
Yeah, he's difficult. All right. Next, it's your turn to defend. Damn it. Good one. Skip Hall. Okay.
Oh, this was one that I actually didn't want to defend, believe it or not. But with Skip Hall, he ticks every single box.
Yep.
He ticks every box. He is the most flawless DB Cooper suspect on paper. He looks exactly like both sketches, without flaw. There's no flaw with this guy. He had aviation experience. He was a liar, a con man, a smoker, a drinker. Had a non-discernible accent. We've heard his voice.
He's fake Hispanic.
He's fake Hispanic, described as Hispanic or Latino looking. That is Skip Hall. He was involved in a lot of shifty, weird, sinister stuff with Interpen. He had skydiving lessons. He was under the tutelage of Jerry Hemming, who's a rock star giant of the skydiving kind of Hall of Fame. I think with Skip Hall, I would certainly be of the belief that he was deeply involved in the Kennedy assassination. He kept a Carcano rifle that he gave, I believe, to his nephew or his stepson. I can't remember the exact details, but I think that Skip Hall, in the Cooper the Spook angle or the Cooper the conspiracy angle, Skip Hall really does shine here because I think that Skip Hall was a lot more involved in the Kennedy assassination than the public should know, or probably will know.
Oh yeah, he was absolutely involved in that. I agree.
There's no, I don't think you'll get many arguments against for that, and I would imagine that he possibly could have used leverage of telling the authorities that he was T.B. Cooper to avoid prosecution of the death penalty for involvement in the assassination of JFK, and was able to use the bargaining chip of being D.B. Cooper to not have his, I suppose, his name and legacy afterwards sullied by possibly firing the fatal shot at the president. He had a pilot's license, parachute experience. He was a crook. He was a career criminal, a polite goon. He was very refined, and he definitely was sociopathic. He had no fear. I mean, so much so that Castro himself thought he was a liability. And I mean, what a fantastic honor for both Castro and your own government to think you're a liability. And that's the kind of person that Cooper was. I mean, it's, again, would not be surprised. As a suspect, he's 99% flawless.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, he's not without flaw, though. I would say that is Skip, I mean, is he homely, right? Is he unattractive? Is he an ugly person? I don't think so. I don't know if people would say that Skip Hall is homely. Again, I'm not attracted to men. That's not my thing, but I mean, is that guy homely? I don't know. Maybe in that picture he's homely. I don't know.
He was married several times and fathered lots of kids.
Yeah. I mean, he did, and ended up selling meth and having his whole family go down for meth, including him. He was flying. I mean, he led the FBI and the CIA on a chase for him across several continents in the late 80s. But I guess, yeah, Skip's hard to attack. Just say that. I agree. He's hard. I don't really know what to say on Skip other than what really ties him to the hijacking, but you can say that about anybody, right?
The guy was a mouthpiece. The guy was an absolute mouthpiece. He went on front of a television camera and was like, and I was offered to shoot the president for $50,000. There's no way that guy got through his whole life without confessing to this. He loved the JFK link. He loved it. He was proud of it. He was in the paper. He loved that shit. He was a paid speaker. He used to speak about, my exploits in Cuba. That's on YouTube. Listen to the guy's speeches. He's very captivating.
I've got that. Here, I'll play that here.
Because I'm not in contact with anybody from Texas.
You give the impression that you wouldn't like to go to Texas at this point.
Well, if I wanted to commit suicide, I would probably go to Dallas, Texas.
Great clip.
I mean, if this guy was D.B. Cooper, he would have mentioned it. I just think he was a gloater. He was in the paper flagrantly with a fake name, Lorenzo Pasillo, this Cuban revolutionary.
Yeah, Lorenzo Pasillo, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I cannot imagine, right, with Skip, the career criminal, the goon, and I mean all his little goon kids that were his he didn't mention the fact that he was DB Cooper to one of these goon kids who then didn't say it to somebody else. This was a guy that ran his mouth. It just rules him out, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah. I won't.
It's a fatal flaw.
I mean, look,
I
I
think
won't
it's a
give it away.
fatal flaw.
I know that. I'll just say this: that John Limbach.
I love John.
Has
John's here.
He did recently meet with the family of Skip Hall, and a lot of this stuff is going in the second volume, and Skip's going to be an even better suspect once I'm not free to say these things yet, but I know these things, and he's going to be a better suspect than people even think he is now. So when these things come out, so.
Oh, I totally believe it, but I mean, to me, that's a fatal flaw that the guy was a mouthpiece.
Yeah, he was a talker for sure. Okay. All right. So I have to defend Ted Braden, but guess what? I'm passing it. I haven't used my passport. You have to defend Ted Braden.
I have to defend Ted Braden. Okay.
Yay.
I have to defend Ted Braden. He was a badass. A lot of people call him the god of circumstantial evidence, which, I mean, circumstantial evidence is just a lawyer's fancy ass name for coincidence.
That's me.
I mean, he had no fear. He was fearless. He had a lot of skydiving experience. A lot of his close friends and associates thought that he was DB Cooper. In that photograph, he was a master of disguise. He's wearing nose putty and blue contact lenses there. So, I mean, he was clearly a master of disguise. He, again, was involved in a trucking fraud for $200,000. Again, quite on the nose, or $250,000. I mean, let's not argue about $50,000 among friends. So as far as Ted Braden, and I mean, Drew wrote a great book about Ted Braden. He wore high shoes on the night to make him 5'10", so he stopped being wee Ted to be Dan Cooper. What else with Ted Braden? I mean, that's it. Just the all-around badass. The CIA, there's no records of him. His whole record base has been expunged forever. There's nothing about him anywhere. He's, a good aspect of the Cooper the Spook angle as well. Some sort of shady CIA stuff. I mean, he might have been a spy, or maybe not, or a covert. I think that's all.
Okay. Well, I guess I would say that I mean, it hurts my heart to attack Ted Braden. Obviously, Ted Braden is, it's like, I was suspect agnostic for a long ass time in the Vortex. I mean, from 2008 until I guess it was 2018. I mean, for a solid decade, I was a suspect agnostic individual. And then Braden came along, and I fell in love with Ted Braden. And obviously my first love, it's my, your high school girlfriend. I love Ted Braden. I don't like attacking Ted Braden. But I would say that his major flaw is the man was short. I mean, we have this photograph here of Ted with some other skydivers. I don't know how that gets mistaken for 6 feet tall.
There's a guy called Don Morrow there. Morrow, that's Vortexy. There's a Morrow there. Don Morrow. That's Vortexy.
Oh, yes. Don, Dan, yeah.
And a Dwayne.
Yes, that's funny. But no, there's Ted there, and he's short and stocky. Now, I mean, I guess you can say that there were CIA tricks to make him look taller. I guess maybe. I mean, it's plausible. But
it doesn't. Yeah, those CIA tricks, the like the pinstripe suits and the tall shoes, they only work if people are outside, not in a fixed height aircraft.
yeah, I mean that's a small guy, and Flo, Alice, Hal Williams, and Tina, primary witnesses who saw Cooper standing, all said at least 6 feet tall. I mean, Alice and Flo's initial statements said 6'1". Hal Williams said 6'1" plus. Tina went from 5'10" to 6 feet tall. So that's a small one. I mean, I don't look. I mean, 6 feet. I mean, I don't know. He's the same height as Tina Mucklow. If Tina Mucklow was willing to say that Cooper was 4 inches taller than her, I've said it all the time. However tall you are, I'm 6'1". It would be hard for me to mistake somebody my height for being 6'5", right? That's not. So somehow Tina mistook a guy who's 5'8", her height, for being 6 feet tall. I can't see that, and so that is the problem with Ted. I would say
there's no 302 under 5'10".
No, I mean, not from people who saw him standing. Dennis Lenz said 5'10", but Dennis Lenz, no. Lisa said seated Ryan Burns, no. Hal Williams came face to face with DB Cooper. DB Cooper, right, face to face with DB Cooper, standing up inside of a terminal, okay, and said he was 6'1" plus. Then we have Alice or Flo running to the cockpit. First thing she writes is 6'1". She saw him walk across the tarmac. She says she first noticed Cooper walking toward her across the tarmac, handing her his ticket to get on the plane. Okay. So
he was a tall, thin man.
Yeah. I mean,
he was tall and thin.
Yeah.
And I had a segue in case I had to attack Ted Braden. So
sure.
I actually took the time to look at other descriptions. So, I mean, Eileen Wuornos was described as 5'3" or 5'4". She was 5'4". Thin pointed nose, slight build, fine messy brown hair, chin dimple, and a freckled oval face. So they got her age, 21 to 25, and her height right. Ted Bundy, 5'11", 6 foot, 22 to 25. Brushed brown hair, rounded, clean-shaven face, mole left side of neck, driving tan Volkswagen Bug. I mean, multiple people saw these people and got their heights right. I found no case anywhere where a height was so drastically wrong. Ted Braden was not DB Cooper. He's too short.
Yeah,
there's no.
That's really it.
It's over. I'm sorry. I was willing to be the WWF heel here and say he is just too short. We can't gaslight Bill. We can't gaslight the Stews. They saw a tall, dark man, not a small, stocky, pale man.
Yeah. Well,
sorry.
I mean, I guess the counter argument would be that the men on the plane thought he was short, but
Bill Mitchell is huge.
Well, but yeah, Bill's 6'2", so I don't.
But back then, would Bill have been 6'5"? Like he's huge. Like he's very imposing.
He's smaller now. He's shrunk in his age, but
But I mean, he's still big. Like I was surprised.
Really, Lisa. Do we have to do this? You want me to? You really want to do this? You calling me out on my Cooper knowledge? I'm sorry.
You said Tina Mucklow said Ted was 4 inches taller.
Yeah. Show you the document. Yeah. Gladly.
Yeah, it's here. Cooper, Lisa, was a tall, thin man. There's nothing else to say.
Here we go. Let's see. All right, Lisa. Here, have fun with this. Let's see. I mean, if you're gonna call me out for saying for something wrong.
Everyone that said that they saw him standing. So Nancy House saw him standing as well whenever he took the briefcase.
She did, but she didn't give a height estimation.
Did she not?
No, she did not. All right, Lisa. Okay, here, call me out on my Cooper knowledge. Let's see.
Jay Weiss said what height?
Description of the hijacker known as DB Cooper. Let's see. Miss Mucklow described the hijacker as follows: male, white, 44 to 46, 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. Okay, there you go, Lisa. There you got it. Yeah, the first one, she said 5'10" to 6 feet tall. So she did say she went as tall as 6 feet tall. So she estimated this guy to be at least up to 4 inches taller than her. Okay. I don't need the instant messenger, Lisa. I know the 302s. Okay. Yes, I know, but this is her second one. This was after she got to think about it. Besides, Tina herself said that I believe she said the only time that she saw him standing, I have to find that, but she did not see him standing much, apparently. She said it somewhere I have somewhere where she said she only saw him standing briefly. Turns out Alice actually never saw him standing. But the fact is, the two people we know came face to face with him while they were standing. Flo says 6'1", then in her 302 says 6 feet tall. Hal Williams came face to face. A man said 6'1" plus. Okay, so I mean, I think Cooper was taller. I don't know how tall the guy was, but he was taller than the average person of his time.
And Ted Braden was shorter than the average man of his time.
I mean, look, it's possible that Ted could have made his height taller. I don't know.
Jay Weiss has guessed my height. Will we play a game? Guess Jude's height. And this is me sitting down. I'm sitting down.
No, Jude is not 5'8". No. Yeah, Jude is not 5'8".
I'm 6'4".
Yeah, Jude's very tall. Yeah, Jude's much taller than I am. So, and I'm 6'1". So, yeah. All right, but okay. So next, we'll move on to Ted Braden. I love Ted. I feel like I'm cheating on my wife or something whenever I talk about Ted Braden. Okay.
Yeah, he wasn't DB Cooper.
Wait, I have to defend.
Oh, I defended Ted Braden. Yeah.
This is the last one for the night.
I know who it is.
I have to defend.
The best for last is Barb.
Okay. Defending Barb. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Lisa, Bill Mitchell said he was 5'9". That's right. But he was sitting down. Bill Mitchell never saw him standing up. So I don't care anybody's height estimation for Cooper who only saw him sitting down. That is irrelevant to me. That is an irrelevant piece of information.
Standing ones are only valid because that's your sitting height. That means nothing. But standing height is the only one that's admissible.
Yeah. I mean, that's for me. All right. Barb. Defending Barb, I would say that. So Barb was a daredevil. She had mental illness, I believe. I know she did. I mean, everybody thought she did. Barb was a daredevil, was perhaps suicidal. She was a narrow face, was a pilot, was a skydiver, would have known the area very well from the sky. So would have known landmarks in the Portland area pretty well. Never had a great job, so possibly needed some money. And confessed to being DB Cooper, so there's that. Was a badass. Things that people thought were lies about Barb Dayton. Like early on in the Barb Dayton story, there was stuff about how, the foreman said, Barb told us that she was captured in World War II and escaped. And Barb said in the early days of Vietnam, she was over there. Well, that has since been proven true. So these fantastical tales that Barb told have been proven true with independent research. So I didn't say, Rose, that trans is a mental illness. I said that she had mental illness, not that being trans was a mental illness. Difference.
As an extra point, it's highly likely that Barb was bipolar, did have issues with anger, both when living as Bobby Dayton and as Barb Dayton. Famously frugal, paranoia. Barb absolutely suffered mental illness throughout her life, both when she was living as Bobby and Barb Dayton. So it's nothing to do with trans.
No, it just, yeah. And so, but yeah, so Barb, I would say that Barb fits the profile in a lot of ways. Barb checks a lot of boxes that you want. And I think that someone who was trans would be good at disguises. And yeah, that's that. All right, you can attack Barb now.
My I suppose rebuttal of Barb Dayton is one word. And can you guess what the one word is, Ryan? I bet you can.
Short.
Sideburns.
Okay. Yeah.
Cooper was described as having ear-length sideburns. Barb Dayton was very much fully transitioned, living as Barb Dayton, and did not have sideburns. It's as simple as that. And just the usuals: too short, too pale, too blue-eyed. Was from the area, was a member of local aviation clubs in the Pacific Northwest. Barb Dayton, I would love to be DB Cooper as well. Darren always says, if I were to pick who DB Cooper was, it would be Barb Dayton. Barb Dayton's confession story is, I believe, somewhat worse than Rekha's because it's so far away. It's so wrong.
Whoa. Saying Barb? No, Barb said that she jumped in Woodburn, Oregon. That's way closer than Clay Elum.
We're not, but it's still over 100 miles away.
Is it? Maybe. I'll have to check.
It's far. It is very far, and even one thing with Barb, famously was very, very frugal. Had old garden furniture in her apartment. Had no indication. Barb. I don't know this for sure. I remember speaking to Ron and Pat about it. I think Barb funded a lot of her own surgery with life savings and was pretty much destitute afterward, and had no money. There was no indication that she had hijacked a plane, had come into money. I don't think. I would love her to be Cooper, but she isn't. It would be the best story. It would really work, but does not match the description at all in any way. And we're not talking about sketches here. We're talking about 302s. If you want to know what Cooper looked like, don't look at the damn drawings. Look at what they said he looked like. So, as far as the pictures, they mean nothing, right? You can see Jesus in the toast, but you can't see the Jesus in the toast and what people said. What they saw was a tall, thin, medium. I know Mary said, some had said medium build, but he was a taller, darker, thin, medium man, and
with a small nose, a weird lower lip, and an angular face.
A narrow face, and that's what DB Cooper looked like. Barb Dayton, even if she posed and postulated as Bobby Dayton again, Bobby Dayton did not look like DB Cooper. That's not the man they saw.
Yeah.
So there's no likeness, there's no resemblance. But again, I think with Barb wanted to be DB Cooper, very similar to Sheridan Peterson. There's only a handful of people that Barb was not taken seriously by the FBI.
No,
doesn't
Barb
have a
was not even
file.
given a suspect number, actually.
No, so the FBI did not feel that she was worth pursuing in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, and it's probably down to just that fact is that multiple witnesses described the hijacker, and Bobby or Barb Dayton, whichever guys, was not the man or woman that they saw.
Yeah. It's so that's that. So, but yeah, I would that's our wheel there, and so we'll call it a night there. You can go to sleep, my friend. That's all successful.
3 hours and 20 minutes. This has to be that's a record.
I know. Look, me and you are endowed with the gift of gab, if nothing else, for sure.
And it flew in, and everybody was engaged, and everybody stayed to the end. How many people had are still here?
Didn't lose many. Yeah, didn't lose many. You're welcome, Rose. Yeah, thanks for staying up late, Jude, for sure. And Jude did listen. Jude and we're gonna do it. For anybody listening to this or watching this, Jude did say, and we will do it next time. Next time me and Jude do something, we will work it out to where we're gonna have a Euro-friendly Cooper Sleuth live, to where we'll have on a weekend or something where it's at a decent hour for the Europeans. All right. So,
and some made themselves known at the start, where they were like, hi from Great Britain, hi from Ireland, hi, so obviously they'll drop off and I'll be the last guy standing.
Yeah. So yeah, they're all gone to bed over there. But anyway, so okay, folks. Well, that is it for this evening, and we will talk to you guys again soon. Thank you, Jude, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple months, my friend.
Thank you so much. See you all soon.
All right. Bye.
Goodbye.